Chapter 1. Elena. They say you should never surprise a politician because they are always hiding something. Usually it is a slush fund, or a second family in Vermont. But in the case of my fiancé, Senator Marcus Sterling, it was his secretary. It was almost a cliché. It was so boring I should have been offended by the lack of creativity more than the infidelity itself. I stood in the doorway of his campaign headquarters, holding a bag of takeout Thai food that was rapidly cooling against my chest. The office was dim, lit only by the streetlights filtering through the blinds and the glow of the copier machine in the corner. The rhythmic squeaking of the mahogany desk filled the silence. It was the same antique desk my father had gifted him when he won the primary. That detail stung more than it should have. Marcus was busy. Very busy. I watched for a moment. It was a strange reaction, I know. Most women would scream. They would drop the Thai food and the pad Thai would splatter everywhere like a tragic culinary crime scene. They would storm in slapping faces and demanding answers. They would cry. I did not do any of that. I just stood there in my beige cashmere coat, feeling a cold numbness spread from my chest to my fingertips. "Oh God, yes," Marcus groaned. I winced. He used that exact same tone when he saw a good poll number. It was the sound of a man getting exactly what he felt he was owed. The woman beneath him was young. She had that wide-eyed, eager look that I had lost about 3 years ago when I realized that being a politician's wife meant being a prop. Her heels were on the floor. Red bottoms. Nice shoes. Shame about the taste in men. I looked down at the engagement ring on my finger. It was a 3-carat solitaire, flawless and cold. Just like our relationship. I had spent the last 2 years molding myself into the perfect Senate spouse. I wore the pastels. I smiled at the fundraisers. I ignored the way he checked his watch when I talked about my day. I had suppressed every chaotic impulse I had ever had just to be worthy of the Sterling name. I had starved myself to fit into sample sizes, and I had silenced my opinions to fit into his platform. And for what? To watch him sweat over a terrified intern on a Wednesday night. Something in my brain snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was quiet, like a rubber band giving up the ghost. It was the sound of the last thread of my patience disintegrating. I did not want to cry. I wanted to burn the city down. I set the bag of Thai food on the receptionist's desk. I hoped the smell of peanut sauce would haunt him. It would linger in the fabric of the expensive rug and cling to the curtains. Every time he walked past this desk, he would smell peanuts and betrayal. I turned around and walked out. The night air in Chicago was biting, but it felt good against my flushed skin. It felt real. I walked to my car, my heels clicking a sharp, angry rhythm on the pavement. I unlocked my pristine white Audi and slid into the driver's seat. The leather was cold. My hands were shaking. Not from sadness. From rage. Pure, uncut rage. It was a physical thing, a heat that started in my belly and clawed its way up my throat. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My hair was perfect. My makeup was flawless. I looked like a porcelain doll. I looked like a victim. I hated it. I hated the beige coat. I hated the sensible pearls. I hated the woman staring back at me because she was a liar. She had pretended to be good for so long that she had almost forgotten she was dangerous. I needed to go somewhere loud. Somewhere dirty. Somewhere Marcus would never be caught dead in, because it would ruin his polling numbers with the suburban moms. I needed to go somewhere that would stain. I put the car in gear and peeled out of the parking lot, leaving the senator and his secretary to their mediocrity. I drove without a destination for 20 minutes until I saw the neon sign flickering in the distance. The Red Door. I had heard about this place. My father had warned me about it once when I was 18, telling me it was a hive of scum and villainy. He said the kind of men who went there were the kind who did not have retirement plans or consciences. He said good girls stayed on the north side. Well, I was done being a good girl. I parked the Audi between a rusted pickup truck and a motorcycle that looked like it had been through a war. I stuck out like a sore thumb. A rich girl in a cashmere coat walking into a dive bar on the wrong side of the tracks. I did not care. The bouncer was a mountain of a man, with a scar running through his eyebrow. He was wearing a jacket that was 2 sizes too small for his biceps. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on the diamond on my finger. "You are lost, sweetheart," he rumbled. "I am exactly where I need to be," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He hesitated, then shrugged and stepped aside. He probably thought I was looking for a drug dealer or a bathroom. He had no idea I was looking for a nuclear option. The moment I stepped inside, the bass hit me in the chest. The air smelled of stale beer, cheap whiskey, and bad decisions. It was crowded, dark, and dangerous. It was exactly what I needed. The music was loud enough to drown out the sound of Marcus's voice in my head. I pushed my way through the crowd, ignoring the whistles and the leering looks. A hand brushed my arm, and I shook it off without looking back. I marched straight to the bar. "Vodka," I told the bartender. "The whole bottle." The bartender raised an eyebrow. He was a skinny guy with tattoos up his neck and eyes that had seen too much. "You got money for that princess?" I slapped my Black American Express card on the sticky counter. It was Marcus's account. "Keep the tab open," I said. He poured me a shot. I threw it back. It burned going down, tasting like gasoline and regret. I slammed the glass down. Again. By the 3rd shot, the sharp edges of the image of Marcus on his desk started to blur, but the anger remained. It was a living, breathing thing inside me. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted to do something that would make his skin crawl. I wanted to desecrate something he loved. I spun around on the bar stool, scanning the room. If I was going to blow up my life, I was going to do it properly. I needed a match. I saw plenty of options. There was a biker in the corner, wiping froth from his beard. He looked mean but simple. A guy in a suit who looked like a low-level drug dealer trying too hard to look important. A group of college boys near the pool table looking for trouble they couldn't handle. No, none of them were right. They were too messy. Too loud. I didn't want messy. I wanted lethal. Then I saw him. He was sitting in a booth in the back, shadowed by the darkness. He wasn't looking at the dancers or the fight breaking out near the jukebox. He was looking at me. He was wearing a black suit, but he didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a funeral director for the Mafia. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing a hint of tanned skin. He had dark hair, dark eyes, and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He was sitting with a stillness that was unnatural in a place this chaotic. He was terrifying. The air around him seemed different. Heavy. People gave his booth a wide berth as if they could sense the predator in their midst. He was sipping a tumbler of amber liquid, holding the glass with long, elegant fingers. There was no phone on the table. No friends. Just him in the dark. My breath hitched. He was the most dangerous thing in the room. I slid off the bar stool. My legs felt a little wobbly from the vodka, but my determination was iron. I walked toward him. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around. My upbringing, my manners, my survival instinct all yelled that this man was bad news, that he would chew me up and spit me out, that men like him didn't play by rules. Good. I was tired of rules. I stopped at the edge of his table. He didn't look up immediately. He took a slow sip of his drink, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. He was testing me, waiting to see if I would run. Then he slowly raised his eyes. They were black, bottomless, cold. They were the eyes of a man who slept soundly after doing terrible things. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was deep, a low rumble that vibrated in the soles of my feet. It wasn't a friendly voice. It was a warning. I swallowed hard. Up close, he was even more intimidating. There was a faint scar on his cheek, barely visible in the dim light. It made him look rugged and ruined. "I need a favor," I said. He leaned back in the booth, crossing his arms over his chest. A smirk played on his lips. It wasn't a nice smirk. It was the kind of smirk a wolf gives a sheep that has wandered into the den. "I do not do favors," he said. "I do transactions." "Fine," I said. "A transaction?" He looked me over, slowly starting from my heels, moving up my legs, lingering on my waist, and finally meeting my eyes again. It felt like he was stripping me naked with a glance. I should have been offended. I should have slapped him. But instead I felt a jolt of electricity shoot straight to my core. It was hot and foreign and undeniable. "You are the Sterling girl," he said. It wasn't a question. He stated it like a fact he had known for a long time. I stiffened. Of course he knew. Everyone knew. My face had been in the society pages for months. The blushing bride. The lucky girl. "Does that matter?" I asked, keeping my chin high. "It makes you expensive trouble," he said. "Go home, princess. Your fiancé is probably wondering where you are." I laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound that scraped my throat. "My fiancé is currently busy screwing his secretary on his desk," I said. The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. He set his glass down on the table with a soft clink. He didn't look surprised. He looked intrigued. "And you are here why?" "To cry about it." "No," I said, stepping closer. I leaned down, placing my hands on the table. I leaned into his space, smelling expensive cologne and tobacco. It was a heady mix. "I am here because I have the keys to his office," I whispered, "and I want to do something on that desk that he will never be able to scrub off." The man went still. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. He tilted his head, studying me like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. He looked at my mouth, then my eyes, then my hands on his table. "You want revenge?" he said softly. "I want to burn his world down," I corrected. "But I need a match." He looked at me for a long moment. The noise of the bar seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in the bubble of tension. He was weighing me, measuring my resolve. Then he stood up. He was tall, towering over me. He had to be at least 6'3". The air shifted around us, the temperature dropping. He stepped out of the booth and loomed over me, blocking out the rest of the bar. His presence was overwhelming. "You are playing a dangerous game, Elena," he said, using my name like a caress and a threat all at once. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. I refused to blink. "I don't care," I said. "Are you coming or not?" He stared at me and then he smiled. It was a terrifying, beautiful smile. It was the smile of the devil accepting a bargain. "Lead the way," he said. I turned and walked toward the exit, my heart hammering against my ribs. I knew I was making a mistake. A massive, colossal mistake. I was leading a wolf into the henhouse. But as I pushed open the heavy red door and stepped back into the cold night air, I realized something. I didn't care if he was the wolf. Tonight, I wanted to be the bite.
Chapter 2. Luca. I followed her out of the bar, watching the way her hips swayed in that expensive coat. She was insane. That was my first thought. My second thought was that she was going to be the most entertaining thing that had happened to me in months. I knew exactly who she was. Elena Vance, heiress, socialite, the future Mrs. Senator Sterling. I had spent the last 6 months reading files on her, digging up dirt on her fiancé, trying to find a weak point in his armor so I could crush his anti-crime bill. The man was a nuisance. He was loud, self-righteous, and bad for business. I never expected the weak point to walk into my bar, order 3 shots of vodka, and ask me to defile his office. It was almost too easy. I should have said no. I was Luca Moretti, the underboss of the Chicago outfit. I had a meeting in 20 minutes with a supplier from Detroit who was notoriously impatient. I had a shipment coming in at the docks at midnight that required my personal oversight. I did not have time to indulge in a scorned woman's revenge fantasy. But when she had looked at me with those blue eyes burning with hate, I felt something twitch in my chest. She wasn't looking for comfort. She was looking for a weapon. And she had looked at every man in that bar and decided I was the sharpest one. She was right. I walked to my car, a sleek black Mercedes parked in the shadows away from the streetlights. She stopped by her white Audi. It was parked crookedly between two rusted trucks like a pearl dropped in the mud. "Get in," I said, unlocking my doors. She hesitated. Her hand hovered over her door handle. "We take my car," she said. "It has the parking permit for the building." I looked at the Audi. It was cute. It was safe. It was everything she was trying to escape. "I am not having sex in an Audi," I said. "Get in the car, Elena." She bristled at the command. I could see her mouth open to argue to tell me she was in charge here. Then she shut it. She realized she had crossed a line into my world, and in my world I gave the orders. She wanted a monster. She couldn't be surprised when he bit. She walked over and slid into the passenger seat of my car. I got in and started the engine. It purred like a caged beast waiting to be let loose. I pulled out onto the road, driving smooth and fast. "Where is it?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Downtown," she said, staring out the window. 4th and Main. I glanced at her. She was gripping her purse so hard her knuckles were white. She was terrified. Good. She should be. She had no idea who I was. To her, I was just some rough trade from a dive bar, a warm body to use to hurt Daddy. If she knew my last name, she would be running in the opposite direction. "Why me?" I asked, breaking the silence. She didn't look at me. "Because you looked like you wouldn't ask for my number afterward." I chuckled darkly. It was a low sound that seemed to make the air in the car tighter. "You think I'm safe? I think you're a disaster," she said, turning to face me. "And that is exactly what I need right now. A disaster." I reached over and rested my hand on her thigh. She flinched but didn't pull away. The fabric of her dress was silk, soft and expensive. My hand looked large and rough against her skin. I could feel the heat of her body radiating through the fabric. "Careful, princess," I murmured. "You might get more of a disaster than you bargained for." She didn't speak for the rest of the ride. We pulled up to the campaign headquarters, a sleek glass building in the center of the financial district. It was late and the streets were empty. The city looked clean from here, deceptively peaceful. She pulled a key card from her purse. Her hands were shaking again. I took the card from her fingers. My skin brushed hers, and I felt a spark. A real one. It wasn't just lust. It was recognition. We were two predators circling the same kill. I unlocked the side door and we slipped inside. The lobby was quiet, the security guard nowhere to be seen. We took the elevator to the top floor. The silence in the elevator was heavy, thick with tension. I could hear her breathing fast and shallow. I watched the numbers climb. 1, 2, 3. She was staring at the doors, trying to keep her composure, but I could smell her anxiety. It was mixed with arousal, a potent combination. When the doors opened, she led me down a hallway lined with framed photos of her fiancé, shaking hands with babies and veterans. I wanted to smash every single one of them. Sterling was a rat, a corrupt hypocrite who took bribes with one hand and signed anti-mafia legislation with the other. And he was cheating on this woman. He was an idiot. She stopped in front of a heavy oak door. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. Then she pushed it open. The office was empty now. The lights were off, but the scent of sex still lingered in the air, faint but unmistakable. Or maybe it was just her imagination projecting her trauma onto the room. Either way, the energy in here was rancid. She walked over to the desk. It was a massive thing cluttered with files and a lukewarm takeout bag. "This is it," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "This is where he did it." I walked up behind her. I could feel the heat radiating off her body. She was vibrating with adrenaline. She looked small against the backdrop of the city skyline visible through the window, but she felt dangerous. So I said, my voice low, right in her ear, "What do you want to do about it?" She turned around to face me. Her eyes were wild. "I want you to fuck me," she whispered. "Right here. On his papers. On his desk. I want you to make me forget his name." I didn't need to be told twice. I grabbed her waist and hoisted her up onto the desk, sending a stack of legislative bills cascading to the floor. She gasped, her hands grabbing my shoulders to steady herself. I stepped between her legs, pushing her skirt up. She wasn't wearing stockings. Her skin was warm, soft, inviting. "You sure about this?" I asked one last time. "Once we start, I don't stop." She wrapped her legs around my waist, pulling me closer. Her heels dug into my lower back. "Don't stop," she demanded. "Ruin it. Ruin everything." I crashed my lips onto hers. She tasted like vodka and expensive lipstick. She kissed me back with a ferocity that surprised me, biting my lip, tangling her fingers in my hair. There was no gentleness in it. It was a clash. A war. She was angry, and I was hungry. I ripped her blouse open, buttons pinging off the floor and rolling under the sofa. She didn't care. She was clawing at my shirt, desperate to feel skin. She wanted to be consumed. She wanted to be erased. I lifted her hips and positioned myself. I looked her in the eye. "Look at me," I commanded. She looked at me, her pupils blown wide. "Scream for me," I whispered. "Not him. Me." Then I thrust into her, and she threw her head back and shattered. We destroyed that office. We knocked over the lamp. We swept the computer monitor aside. We made a mess of everything Marcus Sterling held dear. I drove into her with a punishing rhythm, taking everything she offered and demanding more. She was tight, wet, and perfect. She dug her nails into my shoulders, screaming my name. Or rather, screaming simply because she had no words left. For the next hour, Elena Vance didn't look like a senator's wife. She looked like mine. When it was over, she lay on the desk, her chest heaving, her hair a chaotic halo around her head. Her skin was flushed, a beautiful shade of pink. I stood up, adjusting my clothes. I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, not just sexual, but strategic. I had taken something that belonged to my enemy, and I had made it mine. I had branded her. Even if she never saw me again, she would never be able to look at this desk without remembering my hands on her body. I picked up my suit jacket from the floor. It was wrinkled, but I didn't care. I draped it over her naked form. She was starting to shiver, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving the reality of what she had done to settle in. I leaned down and brushed a stray hair from her forehead. She looked at me, her eyes hazy. "Who are you?" she whispered. I smirked. "The guy who just ruined you for anyone else," I said. I grabbed a notepad from the floor and a pen. I scribbled a quick note. "Next time, ask my name before you beg." I left the note on the desk next to her hand. I walked to the door, not looking back. I needed to leave before I did something stupid like stay. Before I decided to wrap her up in that jacket and take her home with me. But as the elevator doors closed, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't a one-time transaction. I had just started a war, and I intended to win.
Chapter 3. Elena. I woke up to the smell of cold coffee and expensive leather. For a terrifying second, I didn't know where I was. My back was stiff, my neck was sore, and there was a persistent throbbing behind my eyes that whispered vodka. I shifted, and a stack of papers slid out from under my leg, fluttering to the floor like dead leaves. Then it hit me. The campaign office. The desk. The stranger. I sat up so fast the room spun. The morning sun was streaming through the blinds, illuminating the absolute wreckage of Senator Marcus Sterling's office. It looked like a tornado had touched down inside the room, specifically a tornado fueled by rage and lust. The lamp was on its side. The Thai food I had left on the receptionist's desk outside was the least of Marcus's problems now. His precious legislative drafts were crinkled and scattered across the carpet. His leather chair was spun around facing the window like a sulking child. And I was naked. Well, mostly. I looked down. I was draped in a black suit jacket. It was heavy-tailored and smelled like cedar tobacco and something dark and masculine that made my stomach flip. He was gone. I scanned the room, half expecting him to be sitting in the corner, watching me with those terrifying black eyes, but the office was empty. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the HVAC system. I felt a strange cocktail of emotions swirling in my chest. Shame. Yes, a little. Panic. Definitely. But underneath that there was a cold, hard knot of satisfaction. I had done it. I had actually done it. I looked at the desk. Right next to my hand, resting on top of a crumpled poll report, was a notepad. I picked it up. The handwriting was sharp, angular, and aggressive. It looked like the handwriting of a man who used a fountain pen as a weapon. Next time, ask my name before you beg. My breath hitched. I read it again. The arrogance of it made my cheeks heat up. Beg. I hadn't begged. Had I? The memories were a blur of skin and friction and commands I had followed without question. I remembered his hands on my waist. I remembered the way he had looked at me like I was something delicious he was about to devour. I remembered asking him not to stop. Okay, maybe I had begged a little. I crumpled the note in my fist. I needed to get out of here. Marcus usually came in at 8. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:15. Panic spiked in my chest, replacing the lingering arousal. If Marcus walked in now and found me naked on his desk, wrapped in another man's coat, I wouldn't just lose my dignity. I would lose the upper hand. And right now, the upper hand was the only thing I had left. I scrambled off the desk, my legs wobbling. I felt like a newborn foal in high heels. I found my dress in a heap near the bookshelf. 2 buttons were missing. I didn't care. I pulled it on my fingers, shaking as I tried to make myself look presentable. The silk was wrinkled and I smelled like sex and expensive cologne. I looked around for my underwear. I checked under the desk. I checked near the sofa. Nothing. I paused. I looked at the filing cabinet where Marcus kept his donor lists. Leave them. The thought was petty. It was childish. It was perfect. Let Marcus find them. Let him explain to his secretary why his fiancée's lace thong was under his filing cabinet. Let him wonder what happened here. Let him smell the other man on his leather chair. I grabbed my purse and my shoes, not bothering to put the heels back on. I walked barefoot to the door, clutching the stranger's jacket around my shoulders like a shield. I should have left it. It was evidence. But I couldn't bring myself to drop it. It was warm, and right now I felt very, very cold. I peered into the hallway. Empty. I made a break for the elevator. I pressed the button, aggressively tapping my foot against the carpet. Come on, come on. When the doors slid open, I practically dived inside. I watched the numbers descend my heart, hammering against my ribs. 4th floor, 3rd floor, 2nd floor. When the doors opened to the lobby, I kept my head down. The security guard was there now, a chubby man named Earl who was nursing a coffee. Morning, Earl? I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He looked up, blinking. Miss Vance. You are here early. I just came to drop off some files, I said, clutching the jacket tighter around me, hoping he wouldn't notice my bare feet, or the fact that I looked like I had been dragged through a hedge. Have a good day, Earl. I pushed through the glass doors and hit the sidewalk. The morning air was crisp and busy. People were rushing to work in suits, holding briefcases. They looked so normal. so put together. I felt like an alien. I made it to my car without collapsing. Once I was safe inside the white leather interior of my Audi, I locked the doors and let out a scream that had been building in my throat for 12 hours. It was a raw, ugly sound. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of release. I gripped the steering wheel, my forehead resting against the cool leather. "I am free," I whispered. I didn't feel free, I felt terrifyingly untethered. I pulled out my phone. 7 missed calls from Marcus. 3 texts. "Where are you? I am at home, you are not here." Elena, stop being dramatic. Dramatic. I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. The audacity of this man. He cheats on me in his office and then calls me dramatic for not being home to cook him breakfast. I typed a reply. My thumbs flew across the screen. "I went to the office to bring you dinner last night. I hope your secretary tastes better than pad thai. We are done. Do not come to the apartment. I am changing the locks." I hit send. Then I blocked his number. I started the car and drove home. I took the long way, driving along the lakeshore, watching the water churn against the rocks. I needed a minute. I needed to remember who I was before I walked into that apartment and started packing. When I finally got home, the apartment felt foreign. It was filled with wedding gifts, a crystal vase from my aunt, a set of silver candlesticks from the mayor. It all looked like clutter now. I went straight to the bathroom. I turned the shower on as hot as it would go. I stripped off the ruined dress and threw it in the trash. I stepped under the spray, letting the scalding water beat against my skin. I scrubbed. I scrubbed until my skin was pink. I washed my hair twice. I was trying to wash off the scent of the bar and the whiskey and the man. But no matter how hard I scrubbed, I couldn't wash away the memory of his hands, or the way he had looked at me when he left. Like he owned me. I stepped out of the shower and wrapped a thick towel around myself. I walked into my bedroom feeling hollowed out, but clean. Then I saw it. The black suit jacket was thrown over my vanity chair where I had dropped it. I walked over to it slowly. It looked out of place in my cream and gold bedroom. It was too dark. Too dangerous. I picked it up. The fabric was incredible, soft but durable. I checked the pockets looking for an ID, a business card, anything to tell me who I had just destroyed my life with. Nothing. The pockets were empty. Of course they were. A man like that didn't leave breadcrumbs. I checked the inside label. It wasn't a brand I recognized. It was bespoke. Hand-stitched. And embroidered in silver thread on the inside pocket was a single initial. M, just M. I ran my thumb over the thread. It was raised and silky. M. Michael. Matthew. Mark. None of those names fit. He didn't look like a Michael. He looked like a Hades. A Lucifer. "Who are you?" I whispered to the empty room. I didn't know the answer. And part of me hoped I never would. Because if I ever saw that man again, I wouldn't be able to look him in the eye. I took the jacket and hung it in the back of my closet behind my winter coats. I should have thrown it away or burned it. But I couldn't. It was a trophy. A reminder that for one night I wasn't the perfect politician's wife. I was a disaster. My phone buzzed on the vanity. It wasn't Marcus. I had blocked him. It was my father. "Elena, I just got a very interesting call from the senator. He says you are being hysterical. Call me immediately." I stared at the screen. Hysterical. Dramatic. I turned the phone off. I walked to the window and looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably trying to spin this, trying to find a way to make himself the victim. And somewhere else out there was a man with dark eyes and a dangerous smile who knew exactly what I looked like when I fell apart. I pressed my hand against the glass. Let them call me hysterical. Let them call me crazy. I was done being good. I turned away from the window and started to pack. I had a life to dismantle. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the mess. Chapter 4. Elena. 6 months is a long time. It is enough time to grow out a bad haircut. It is enough time to train for a marathon. And apparently it is exactly enough time for a United States senator to systematically dismantle the life of his ex-fiancée piece by piece until she is left with nothing but a maxed-out credit card and a heavy sense of impending doom. I sat in the plush leather chair of the First National Bank of Chicago, trying to look like I belonged there. I was wearing my last good suit. It was a navy Chanel number that I had managed to save from the purge when I sold half my closet on eBay to pay the retainer for my lawyer. Across the desk, Mr. Henderson was sweating. He was a nice man. He had approved the loan for my first car. He had been to my engagement party. He had eaten the mini crab cakes and shaken Marcus's hand. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye. "I am sorry, Elena," he said, his voice tight. "It is out of my hands." The risk assessment on Vance Shipping came back flagged. "We cannot extend the line of credit." I gripped the arms of the chair. My fingernails dug into the leather. Flagged for what I asked, keeping my voice calm. It took effort. I wanted to scream. "We have been clients for 30 years. My father built this bank's reputation with his business." Mr. Henderson sighed. He glanced at the door as if he expected the FBI to burst in. "It is not about your father," he whispered, leaning in. "It is political, Elena. You know that. The unexpected audits? The port delays? The zoning issues at the warehouse? Someone very powerful is making it very difficult for your family to do business. And the bank? Well, the bank hates difficulty." Marcus. I didn't say his name, but it hung in the air between us like a foul smell. Since the night I walked out on him, Marcus hadn't just moved on. He had gone to war. He spun the narrative, of course. To the press, I was the unstable socialite who had a mental break and fled the engagement because I couldn't handle the pressure of public life. He played the heartbroken saint perfectly. Behind the scenes, he was a tyrant. He used his connections to freeze our accounts. He called in favors to have inspectors shut down our docks for safety violations. He was choking Vance Shipping to death slowly and methodically because I had dared to bruise his ego. "So that is it?" I asked, standing up. "You are just going to let us sink?" Mr. Henderson looked miserable. "I am sorry, Elena. If you can find an outside investor, maybe we can restructure. But right now, the bank is out." I walked out of the bank with my head high, but my stomach was in knots. It was raining outside. Of course it was raining. Chicago in November was a gray, wet, miserable place. I opened my umbrella and stepped onto the street. My phone buzzed. It was my father. "Did you get it?" he asked. His voice sounded frail. He had aged 10 years in the last 6 months. The stress was killing him, and that made me hate Marcus more than the bankruptcy ever could. "No, Dad," I said, fighting the wobble in my voice. Henderson said no. There was a long silence on the other end. "Okay," my father said softly. "We will figure something out. Come by the office." I hung up and hailed a cab. I missed my Audi. I had sold it 2 months ago when the liquidity crisis hit. Now I took cabs or the train like a normal person. It was humbling. It was also infuriating. I arrived at the Vance Shipping headquarters down by the Navy Pier. It used to be a bustling hub of activity. Trucks coming and going, men shouting orders, the smell of diesel and commerce in the air. Today it was quiet. Too quiet. Half the loading bays were empty. The union guys were standing around smoking, looking worried. They knew. Everyone knew. I walked up to the executive offices. My father was sitting at his desk, staring at a spreadsheet that was bleeding red ink. He looked up when I entered and forced a smile. "Don't worry about it, kiddo," he said. "We have survived recessions and strikes. We will survive Marcus Sterling." "We have payroll on Friday," I said, sitting down across from him. "We have $40,000 in the operating account. Payroll is $200,000. My father rubbed his temples. "I made some calls," he said. "There is a holding company, a private equity firm. They buy distressed assets. They are interested in a meeting." My ears perked up. Distressed assets was just a polite way of saying, companies that are about to die. But right now, I would take a deal with the devil if it kept the lights on. Who are they? I asked. He slid a black envelope across the desk. It was heavy, expensive. The paper felt like velvet under my fingertips. There was no return address, just a silver logo embossed on the front. A stylized geometric shape that looked vaguely like a mountain, or maybe a shark fin. M Holdings. Never heard of them, I said. They are new, my father said. Aggressive. They have been buying up real estate and logistics companies all over the city for the last year. They are hosting a gala tonight, an investors' summit. They sent this an hour ago. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single card, black with silver lettering. You are cordially invited to the Apex Gala, penthouse at the Willis Tower. $8 p.m., admit 1. It didn't look like an invitation, it looked like a summons. I don't like it, I said. It feels predatory. We don't have the luxury of liking it, my father said quietly. He looked at me and his eyes were pleading. Elena, I am too old for this fight. I don't have the energy to go into a room full of sharks and beg for scraps. He didn't have to say the rest. I did. I was the one who started this. I was the one who poked the bear. It was my mess and I had to clean it up. I will go, I said, tucking the invitation into my purse. Are you sure, my father asked? I stood up, smoothing down my skirt. I handled Marcus for 2 years, Dad. I think I can handle a few venture capitalists. I was wrong. I realized I was wrong the moment I stepped out of the elevator at the Willis Tower that night. This wasn't a normal business gala. I had been to plenty of fundraisers and corporate mixers. They usually involved bad wine, stale cheese, and men in ill-fitting suits talking about golf. This was different. The penthouse was dimly lit, bathed in cool blue and violet light. The music was a low, throbbing bass that seemed to vibrate in the floorboards. The waiters were moving silently through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne that probably cost more than my rent. And the people. The men were wearing tuxedos that fit like armor. The women were draped in diamonds that glittered like ice. The energy in the room was sharp, dangerous. I felt underdressed. I was wearing a black dress I had bought at a consignment shop that afternoon. It was simple, elegant, a slip dress with a cowl neck and a slit up the thigh. It looked good, but it didn't look like money. It looked like survival. I took a glass of champagne from a passing tray and downed half of it in one gulp. Liquid courage. I scanned the room looking for anyone who looked like a host. I needed to find someone from M Holdings. I needed to make my pitch. I wandered through the crowd trying to catch snippets of conversation. I heard Russian. I heard Italian. I heard a language I didn't recognize. Excuse me, I said to a man standing near a sculpture that looked like twisted metal. Do you know who is in charge here? He looked at me with amusement. You must be new, he said. I am looking for the owner of M Holdings, I said, keeping my voice firm. I have a business proposition. He laughed. A short bark of a laugh. You don't find him, sweetheart. He finds you. Cryptic. Annoying. I moved on. I spent an hour working the room and getting nowhere. I was starting to feel desperate. The clock was ticking. If I didn't secure funding by tomorrow, Vance Shipping would bounce payroll checks. The union would walk. The Port Authority would pull our license. It would be over. I needed air. I walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The view was breathtaking. Chicago sprawled out below a grid of gold and amber lights. Somewhere down there was Marcus, probably sleeping soundly in his silk sheets. I hate you, I whispered to the glass. Hate is a strong word. The voice came from the shadows to my right. I froze. I knew that voice. It had been 6 months. I had heard it only once for a few hours in a dark room. But I remembered the timbre of it, the way it wrapped around my spine and pulled tight. No, it couldn't be. I turned around slowly. He was standing in the corner leaning against a pillar. He was wearing a tuxedo tonight. Black velvet. It fit him perfectly, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the lean power of his frame. His hair was slightly longer than I remembered, brushed back from his forehead. But the eyes were the same. Black. Bottomless. Mocking. The man from the bar. The man from the desk. The man I had used and discarded like a cheap toy. My heart stopped beating. Then it restarted at double speed. "You," I breathed. He swirled the whiskey in his glass, the ice clinking softly. He didn't look surprised to see me. In fact, he looked like he had been waiting. "Hello, Elena," he said. I took a step back. My mind was racing. What was he doing here? Was he a waiter? Security? A guest? How? "What are you doing here?" I stammered. He pushed off the pillar and took a step toward me. The crowd seemed to part for him instinctively. "I work here," he said. "You work here?" I repeated. Something like that. I looked him up and down. He didn't look like an employee. He looked like the king of the castle. "I need to go," I said. Panic was rising in my throat. This was too much. I could handle the bankruptcy. I could handle Marcus. I could not handle this ghost from my past showing up in the middle of my professional crisis. I turned to leave, but he moved fast. 1 second, he was 5 feet away. The next, he was right in front of me, blocking my path. He didn't touch me, but his presence was a wall I couldn't cross. Leaving so soon, he asked, his voice low. "You haven't even heard my pitch yet." "Your pitch?" I asked, confused. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes locked on mine. "You are here for money, aren't you?" "For Vance shipping." I went cold. "How do you know that?" He smirked, that terrifying, arrogant smirk that I had seen in my dreams for 6 months. "I know a lot of things, Elena. I know your credit is frozen. I know your father is sick. I know your ex-fiancé is trying to bury you." He took another step closer. I could smell him now, that same scent, cedar and tobacco. It made my knees weak. "And I know you still have my jacket," he whispered. I gasped. "How?" "I checked my coat check ticket," he said casually. "You checked a black wool coat. But I know what hangs in your closet." He was stalking me. He had to be. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice rising. He finished his drink and set the glass on a passing waiter's tray without looking. "I am the man who is going to save your company," he said. I stared at him. "You?" "Me." "I don't even know your name," I said. He smiled. And this time it wasn't just amused. It was predatory. "I told you to ask my name before you begged Elena. You didn't listen." He extended a hand toward the center of the room, where a microphone was set up on a small stage. The music died down. The room went silent. "Watch," he said. He walked past me, his shoulder brushing mine, sending a shockwave through my body. He walked up the steps to the stage. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the crowd of sharks and billionaires, and they all went still. They looked at him with respect, with fear. "Good evening," he said, his voice amplified, filling the penthouse. "Thank you all for coming." He looked straight at me across the room. "I am Luca Moretti, CEO of Moretti Holdings." The room erupted in polite applause. I stood there frozen. Moretti, I knew that name, not from the business pages, from the crime blotter. The Moretti family ran Chicago. They were the mob, the Mafia, the outfit, and I had slept with the boss. And now apparently I was asking him for a loan. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at the exit. It seemed miles away. Luca Moretti finished his speech, but his eyes never left mine. He stepped off the stage and started walking toward me. I realized then that this wasn't a coincidence. The bankruptcy, the invitation, the gala, it was a trap. And I had walked right into it.
Chapter 5. Luca. I watched the color drain from her face. It was fascinating. Usually when I walked into a room, people reacted with fear or sycophancy. They either wanted to be me or they wanted to avoid being killed by me. But Elena Vance looked at me like I was a ghost that had just crawled out of her closet to haunt her. She looked beautiful in her panic. The black dress she was wearing was simple, too simple for a crowd like this. It screamed of modesty and budget cuts. But the way it clung to her hips, and the way the slit teased the top of her thigh, reminded me vividly of the night she had wrapped those legs around my waist. I stepped off the stage. The applause was dying down, replaced by the low hum of conversation, as the sharks in the room went back to their champagne and their scheming. I didn't care about them. I only cared about the woman who was currently calculating the distance to the elevator. She turned on her heel. She was fast. I was faster. I cut through the crowd, moving with the fluid grace that came from years of navigating rooms full of enemies. I intercepted her just as she reached the hallway leading to the exit. "Going somewhere, Elena?" I asked. She froze. Her hand was hovering over the elevator call button. She turned slowly to face me. Her blue eyes were wide, but there was fire in them. "Good. I didn't want a victim. I wanted a fighter." "Get away from me," she hissed. Her voice was low, trembling with a mix of rage and terror. I took a step closer, crowding her against the marble wall. I rested my hand on the wall next to her head, boxing her in. I wasn't touching her, but I was close enough to smell her. Vanilla and anxiety. It was intoxicating. "We have business to discuss," I said. "I don't do business with criminals," she spat back. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh. "You didn't seem to mind my criminal tendencies 6 months ago. In fact, I recall you finding them quite useful when you wanted to destroy your fiancé's office." She flinched. Her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. "That was a mistake," she said. "A drunken mistake." "Was it?" I leaned in closer, lowering my head until my lips were inches from her ear. "You didn't leave like it was a mistake. You left like you had finally found something real. And you kept the jacket." She gasped. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape route. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "I told you, I know everything." I pulled back slightly, giving her room to breathe, but not enough to run. "Now. We can have this conversation here in the hallway where the security cameras can see us and the gossip columnists can speculate. Or we can go to my private office and discuss the future of Vance Shipping like adults." She stiffened at the mention of her company. "What do you know about my company?" she asked. "I know you are bleeding money. I know the bank denied your loan this morning. I know you have payroll on Friday and $40,000 in the bank. I know your father is talking about selling the fleet for scrap." Her jaw dropped. "You have been spying on me." I shrugged. "I call it due diligence. I pressed the button for the elevator, but not the down button. I pressed the override key that only I had. The doors slid open. "After you," I said. She hesitated. She looked at the open doors, then back at me. She was weighing her options. She was realizing she didn't have any. She stepped inside. I followed her. The doors closed, shutting out the noise of the party. The silence in the small metal box was electric. I could feel the heat coming off her body. I stood behind her, watching her reflection in the polished metal doors. She was holding herself together by a thread. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer immediately. I watched the numbers climb. "Because I want something," I said simply. The elevator opened directly into my private suite. It was a stark contrast to the gala below. Dark wood, leather, minimal furniture. It was a war room. I walked to the bar and poured 2 glasses of scotch. I held one out to her. "Drink," I said. "You look like you are going to faint." She took the glass, but she didn't drink. She set it down on the desk with a sharp click. "I don't want your drink," she said. "I want to know why you lured me here." I walked around the desk and sat down in my leather chair. I picked up a folder that was waiting on the blotting pad. "I didn't lure you, Elena. You came looking for an investor. Here I am." I slid the folder across the desk toward her. Open it. She looked at the folder like it was a bomb. Slowly, she reached out and flipped it open. I watched her eyes scan the documents. I saw the moment the realization hit her. Her breath hitched. Her hand flew to her mouth. This is the promissory note, she said, looking up at me in horror. You bought the debt. I bought it all, I confirmed. The bank loan, the mortgage on the warehouse, the lien on the fleet. As of 9 o'clock this morning, Vance Shipping belongs to Moretti Holdings. She dropped the folder, the papers scattered across the desk. You own me, she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, steepling my fingers. Technically, I own your debt. But yes, effectively, I own you. Why, she demanded, her voice rising. Why would you do this? My family has nothing to do with you. We are legitimate. I stood up. The casual amusement was gone now. This was the part where I stopped playing games. I walked around the desk until I was standing right in front of her. She had to tilt her head back to look me in the eye. Because of him, I said. Him. Sterling, I said. Your ex. Her eyes narrowed. What does Marcus have to do with this? Everything, I said. I paced the room, letting the anger I had been suppressing for months bleed into my voice. Marcus Sterling has been a thorn in my side for 2 years. He uses his platform to attack my business. He raids my warehouses. He seizes my assets. He preaches about law and order, while he takes bribes from the cartels to look the other way. I stopped and looked at her. He is a hypocrite, and I hate hypocrites. I walked back to her. When you walked into my bar that night, I saw an opportunity. I saw a way to hurt him, to embarrass him, but then I paused. My gaze dropped to her lips, then back up to her eyes. Then I realized you hate him just as much as I do. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. So what, she asked. You want me to be what? Your spy. You want me to get back together with him and feed you information. I laughed harshly. God, no. I would never let you go back to him. Then what do you want? I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I tossed it onto the desk. It landed with a soft thud next to the bankruptcy papers. She stared at it. Open it, I said. She reached out her hand, shaking. She flipped the lid. Inside was a diamond, a massive emerald-cut diamond set in platinum. It was bigger than the one Marcus had given her. Cleaner, sharper. What is this? She asked, her voice barely audible. A proposal, I said. She looked up at me, her face pale. You want to marry me? I want a partnership, I corrected. I leaned against the edge of the desk, crossing my ankles. Here is the deal, Elena. I forgive the debt. I inject $20 million into Vance Shipping. Your father retires comfortably. Your workers keep their jobs. The union stays happy. And in exchange, she asked, in exchange, you marry me. She stared at me like I had grown a second head. You are insane, she said. Maybe, I said. But listen to the rest. I stood up and moved into her personal space again. It is a business arrangement. I need legitimacy. The federal investigation into my holdings is heating up. If I am married to a respectable society woman from a legacy family, the heat dies down. They can't raid a company run by the Vance son-in-law without better cause. And what do I get out of it besides not being homeless? She asked. I smiled. A dark, wicked smile. You get protection. I reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. She shivered. Marcus isn't done with you, Elena. He is vindictive. He won't stop until you are on the street, unless you are untouchable. I let my knuckles graze her cheek. If you are my wife, you become untouchable. If he comes near you, I break his hands. If he tries to audit your company, I bury his career. I will be the weapon you were looking for that night at the bar. Only this time I won't just ruin his desk. I will ruin his life." She stared at me. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was terrified of me, yes, but she was tempted. I saw her look at the ring, then at the papers, then at me, and we would have to live together, she asked. Yes, and I knew what she was asking. I leaned in close enough to brush my lips against her ear. "It has to look real, Elena. That means we share a house, we share a name, and yes, we share a bed." She let out a shaky breath. "You said this was business," she whispered. I pulled back and looked into her eyes. The air between us was crackling with the same electricity that had been there in the office. "It is business," I said. "But I think we both know that isn't the only reason you are considering it." I grabbed her hand and pressed it against my chest, right over my heart. "You liked the darkness, Elena. You liked the way I touched you. You liked not having to be the good girl." I moved her hand down, pressing it flat against my stomach. "Marry me and you never have to be good again." She pulled her hand away as if burned. She took a step back, breathing hard. "I need time," she said. I checked my watch. "You have until midnight," I said. "That is when the bank processes the default." I walked over to the door and held it open. "Go back to the party, drink some champagne. Think about it." She walked to the door. She stopped on the threshold and looked back at me. She looked torn. She looked dangerous. "You are the devil," she said. I winked. "And you are the one who summoned me." She turned and fled. I watched her go. I listened to the click of her heels fading down the hallway. I walked back to the desk and picked up the ring box. I snapped it shut. She would say yes. I knew she would, because she was right. I was the devil. But she had already sold her soul the moment she climbed onto that desk. I was just coming to collect.
Chapter 6. Elena. I stumbled out of the elevator and back into the purple haze of the gala. The noise hit me like a physical blow. The laughter, the clinking glasses, the low thrum of the bass. It was all too much. 5 minutes ago, I was a desperate woman looking for a loan. Now I was a woman with a marriage proposal from the devil himself, and a deadline that was ticking down like a bomb. Midnight. I checked my phone. 11:15. I had 45 minutes to decide whether to sell my soul to Luca Moretti or let my father's legacy burn to ash. I made a beeline for the bar. I needed something stronger than champagne. I needed tequila. "Make it a double," I told the bartender. He poured it. I drank it. The burn was grounding. I leaned against the cool marble of the bar and tried to think. My mind was a chaotic mess. Images flashed behind my eyelids. The way Luca had looked at me in that office. The predatory hunger in his eyes. The way he had touched my hair. "Marry me, and you never have to be good again." It was insane. It was dangerous. It was illegal, probably. But God, it was tempting. I looked around the room. I saw faces I recognized. Competitors. Frenemies. People who had whispered about me when the engagement ended. They were all watching me. I could feel their eyes. They were waiting for me to fail. They were waiting for the announcement that Vance Shipping was insolvent so they could pick over the carcass like vultures. And then I saw him. At first I thought it was a hallucination brought on by stress and alcohol. But no. The arrogant tilt of the head was unmistakable. The perfectly coiffed blonde hair. The smile that didn't reach his eyes. Marcus. He was standing near the entrance talking to a group of real estate developers. He was laughing. He looked golden, untouched. While my life was crumbling, he was sipping champagne and making jokes. I felt the rage spike in my blood. It was hot and sharp. I tried to turn away to disappear into the crowd before he saw me. I wasn't ready to face him. Not tonight. Not when I was this fragile. But luck was not on my side. "Elena," he called out. His voice carried over the music. Heads turned. I froze. I took a deep breath, forcing my spine to straighten. I put on my mask, the cool, detached mask of the perfect socialite. I turned around. "Hello, Marcus," I said, my voice flat. He walked over to me. He was wearing a navy tuxedo that I had picked out for him 3 months ago. Seeing it on him made me nauseous. "You look tired," he said, looking me up and down with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. "It has been a long week," I said. "I heard about the bank loan," he said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Tough break, Elle. Henderson is a stickler for risk assessment." I stared at him. The audacity. "You would know," I said, "since you are the one who told him to flag the account." Marcus didn't even blink. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes dancing with amusement. "I don't know what you are talking about. I am just a concerned friend. I hate to see you struggling. Your father looks like he is about to have a heart attack." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Leave my father out of this." Marcus stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled like expensive soap and hypocrisy. "Look, Elena, let's be realistic. Vance Shipping is dead in the water. You are drowning. But I am a generous man. I can make a call. I can get the bank to unfreeze the assets." I narrowed my eyes. "And what would that cost me?" He smiled. It was the smile he used on campaign posters. The one that promised hope but delivered nothing. "Just stop this nonsense," he said. "Call off the lawyers. Issue a statement saying you were unwell when you ended the engagement. We don't have to get married right away, but we can be seen together. Repair my image. Repair your credit. It is a win-win." I stared at him in horror. "You want me to be your prop again?" I whispered. "After you cheated on me, after you tried to bankrupt my family." He shrugged. "Everyone makes mistakes, Elle. The public loves a forgiveness arc. It polls very well. Besides, what is your alternative? You are going to lose everything by morning. Who is going to save you?" He reached out and placed his hand on my bare arm. His palm was clammy. "Come on, Elle. Be a good girl. Be a good girl." Those 4 words echoed in my head. They bounced around, rattling against the cage I had built for myself. I looked at his hand on my arm. Then I looked past him toward the elevators. I saw Luca. He had come down from his office. He was standing on the edge of the dance floor watching us. He wasn't interfering. He wasn't rushing over to save me. He was just watching, waiting. His face was a mask of dark, impassive calm, but his eyes were locked on Marcus's hand on my arm. I remembered what he had said upstairs. "If he comes near you, I break his hands." I looked back at Marcus, at his smug face, at his complete confidence that he had won because he thought I was weak. He thought I was still the woman who color-coordinated his ties and laughed at his bad jokes. He didn't know I had died in a campaign office 6 months ago, and he didn't know who had resurrected me. I took a step back, shaking Marcus's hand off my arm like it was a spider. "No," I said. Marcus blinked. "Excuse me." I said no. I repeated, my voice gaining strength. "I am not your prop. I am not your redemption arc, and I would rather burn my company to the ground than let you save it." Marcus's face hardened. The nice guy mask slipped, revealing the petty tyrant underneath. "Don't be stupid, Elena. It is almost midnight. When that clock strikes 12, you are nothing. You are a bankrupt spinster with a ruined reputation. You need me." I laughed. It was the same laugh I had unleashed in the elevator earlier. Wild, free. "I don't need you, Marcus. I never did." I turned my back on him. "Elena, come back here," he hissed, grabbing for my arm. Again. I spun around, my eyes blazing. "If you touch me again," I said, my voice low and lethal, "I will make you regret it." He hesitated, shocked by the venom in my tone. I walked away. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked toward the man in the black velvet tuxedo, who was holding a glass of whiskey and watching me with pride. I crossed the dance floor. The crowd seemed to blur. All I could see was Luca. He didn't move as I approached. He just waited. I stopped in front of him. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. 11:40, I said, breathless. He checked his watch. You are early. I looked back at Marcus, who was staring at us with a confused scowl. Then I looked up at Luca. Does the offer still stand? I asked. Protection, revenge, freedom. Luca set his glass down on a passing tray. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the velvet box. He didn't open it this time. He just held it in his palm. Only if you mean it, Elena, he said softly. Once you put this on, there is no going back. You are mine. The debt, the company, the body, all of it. I looked at the box. Then I looked at his eyes. The darkness in them didn't scare me anymore. It looked like shelter. I am tired of being good, I whispered. Luca smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Good. He opened the box. The diamond glittered under the chandeliers. He took my left hand. His fingers were warm and calloused. He slid the ring onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. Heavy. Substantial. It felt like a shackle and a shield all at once. He didn't let go of my hand. Ready to start a war, he asked. I squeezed his hand back. Burn him, I said. Luca nodded. He turned, pulling me with him, and walked toward the stage. The music cut out as he approached the microphone. The room went silent again. All eyes were on us. I saw Marcus push his way to the front of the crowd, his face pale, his eyes fixed on the massive rock on my finger. Luca pulled the microphone stand down. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. It was a possessive claim. A warning to every man in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Luca said, his voice booming. I have an announcement. He paused, letting the tension build. He looked directly at Marcus. I am pleased to announce that Moretti Holdings has acquired a new asset today. We have fully acquired the debt of Vance Shipping. A gasp went through the room. I saw my father in the back, clutching his chest but looking hopeful. I saw Marcus look like he had been slapped. But Luca wasn't done. However, he continued, his hand tightening on my waist. That is not the only union we are celebrating tonight. He looked down at me. For a second, the room disappeared. It was just us. The predator and his willing prey. Please join me in congratulating my fiancée, Elena Vance. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of 100 socialites having their collective minds blown. Then the whispers started. A roar of gossip. I looked at Marcus. He was white as a sheet. He looked terrified. He knew what this meant. He knew he couldn't touch me now. He knew he had lost. Luca leaned down and kissed me. It wasn't a polite engagement peck. It was deep, searing, and possessive. He kissed me like he was branding me right there on stage in front of God and the entire city of Chicago. When he pulled back, I was breathless, my lips swollen. Smile, princess, he whispered against my ear. We are on camera. I looked out at the crowd. I looked at Marcus. And for the first time in 6 months, I smiled. A real, genuine smile. Let the war begin.
Chapter 7. Luca. The silence in the room didn't last long. It was broken by the explosion of camera flashes. I felt the shudder run through Elena's body where she was pressed against my side. She wasn't trembling from fear anymore. She was trembling from adrenaline. The same kind of adrenaline I felt right before a hit or a raid. It was the high of jumping off a cliff and realizing you didn't pack a parachute, but you didn't care because the fall was going to be magnificent. I kept my arm locked around her waist. It wasn't just for show. I needed to feel her there. I needed to know she hadn't bolted. I steered her down the steps of the stage. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Men who had spent the last 6 months ignoring her calls were now rushing forward, trying to catch her eye, trying to offer congratulations. I saw the greed in their faces. They saw the ring on her finger, and they saw the Moretti money behind it. I ignored them all. My eyes were fixed on one man. Marcus Sterling was standing near the bar. He looked like he had swallowed a lemon. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He was staring at Elena like she was a ghost. As we passed him, I slowed down. Just for a second. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. I just looked at him. I looked at his cheap tuxedo and his fake tan and the fear in his eyes. Then I tightened my grip on Elena, pulling her closer until her hip bumped against my thigh. I saw Marcus flinch. Message received. "Let's go," I murmured against Elena's hair. Before the reporters breached the perimeter, we moved toward the private elevator. My security team was already there, forming a wall of black suits between us and the chaos. When the elevator doors closed, shutting out the noise and the blinding lights, Elena sagged against the wall. She let out a breath that sounded like a deflating tire. "Oh my God," she whispered. She looked at her hand. The diamond caught the overhead light, casting prisms on the metal walls. "What did we just do?" "We just saved your company," I said, checking my phone. "The transfer is already initiated. Your father will get the notification in 10 minutes. She looked up at me. Her eyes were wide blue and terrified. I wasn't talking about the company, Luca. I was talking about us, that, out there. I stepped closer to her. The elevator was small. Or maybe I just took up a lot of space. "We made a deal, Elena. That out there was just the signature on the contract." The elevator chimed and opened into the private garage. My driver was waiting by the armored SUV. We got in. The door slammed shut, sealing us in the quiet, dark interior. The moment the car started moving, Elena shifted in her seat, turning to face me. The manic energy from the stage was fading, replaced by a cold, hard reality. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," I said, unbuttoning my tuxedo jacket and loosening my tie. "Now you come home with me." "Home," she repeated. "To your house, to my estate, yes." "And what about my things?" "My apartment." "My people are packing your apartment as we speak," I said. "What?" she snapped, sitting up straighter. "You didn't ask me. I didn't have to. It is unsafe for you to stay there, Elena. Marcus has a key. He knows your schedule. He knows your doorman. That place is compromised." She looked furious. I expected her to be furious. Elena Vance wasn't the type to roll over and play dead. That was why I wanted her. "You can't just move me around like a piece of furniture," she hissed. "I have a life, Luca. I have clothes. I have things." "You have a target on your back," I cut in, my voice sharp. I turned in the seat so I was facing her. The streetlights from the highway flashed across her face, illuminating the anger in her eyes. "Do you think Marcus is going to just take this lying down?" I asked. "He is a politician with an ego the size of this city. We just humiliated him publicly. We took his money, his reputation, and his girl in one night. He is going to lash out." Elena swallowed hard. She knew I was right. "So what?" she asked quietly. "I am a prisoner now." I reached out and took her hand, the one with the ring. I ran my thumb over the cold metal of the band. "Not a prisoner, Elena. A protected asset." She pulled her hand away. "That makes it sound worse." I leaned back against the leather seat, watching her. "We need to set some ground rules," I said. "Rules?" she scoffed. "Of course. Let's hear them. Rule number 1, I said, ticking them off on my fingers. "You don't go anywhere without security. If you want to go to the office, fine. But you take my driver and you take my shadow." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a finger. "Rule number 2. You don't talk to Marcus. Not on the phone. Not in person. If he tries to contact you, you direct him to my lawyers. Or to me, she nodded slowly. That one she seemed okay with. And rule number 3, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I leaned forward again, invading her space until our knees were touching. You wear the ring. At all times. You don't take it off to shower. You don't take it off to sleep. That ring is the only thing standing between you and the wolves. It tells everyone that you belong to the Moretti family. And in this town, that means you are untouchable. She looked down at the ring again. She twisted it nervously. It is heavy, she whispered. It is supposed to be, I said. The rest of the drive was silent. We drove out of the city toward the North Shore where the old money lived. But we didn't pull into a driveway with a manicured lawn and a white picket fence. We pulled up to a massive iron gate. The driver rolled down the window and scanned a badge. The gate swung open slowly, revealing a long, winding driveway lined with trees. At the end of the drive sat the house. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Stone walls, slate roof, dark windows. It looked like a castle that had been transported from the Scottish Highlands and dropped into the suburbs of Chicago. There were cameras everywhere. I could see the red lights blinking in the trees. Elena stared out the window, her mouth slightly open. You live here? She asked. I do. It looks like a prison, she muttered. I chuckled. It is the safest place in Illinois. The car stopped in front of the massive double doors. The driver opened the door for Elena. She stepped out, shivering in the night air. I walked up the steps and unlocked the door. Welcome home, Mrs. Moretti, I said. She shot me a glare. Not yet. I smirked. Details. Inside the house was warm. The foyer was grand with marble floors and a staircase that curved up to the second floor. It was beautiful, but it was stark. There were no family photos, no flowers, just art that looked expensive and dangerous. My head of security, a man named Dante, was waiting for us. Boss, he nodded. We secured the perimeter. The moving truck from Miss Vance's apartment will be here in an hour. Good, I said. Put her boxes in the master suite. Elena whipped her head around. Excuse me, she said. I looked at Dante. Dismissed. He nodded and vanished into the shadows, leaving us alone in the foyer. I turned to Elena. Is there a problem? I asked, knowing full well there was a problem. The master suite, she repeated. You said put my boxes in the master suite. Yes. I assumed, she stammered. I assumed there would be a guest room. This is a mansion, Luca. You surely have 10 bedrooms. I do, I said calmly, removing my jacket and tossing it onto a chair. I have 12, actually. Then why am I sleeping in yours? Because that was the deal, Elena. I walked toward her. She held her ground, though I could see her pulse fluttering in her neck. We have to make this look real, I said. The staff talks. The guards talk. If you sleep in the guest room, word gets out that this is a sham marriage within a week. And if people think it is a sham, the protection dissolves. That is ridiculous, she argued. We can just tell them we are traditional, that we are waiting for the wedding. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Elena, I said, stepping close enough to touch her. We destroyed an office together on the first night we met. I think the ship has sailed on us being traditional. She flushed pink. I am not sleeping with you, she said stubbornly. Not like that. Not just because you bought my debt. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She was exhausted. She was fighting a battle she knew she couldn't win, but she was fighting anyway. I admired that. I am not asking you to put out Elena. I said, my voice softer now. The bed is a California king. It is big enough for 2 people to sleep without touching. She crossed her arms. And if I don't trust you? I smiled. You trusted me enough to get in my car that night at the bar. You trusted me enough to let me tie your hands. You trust me." She looked away, biting her lip. "Fine," she whispered. "But if you try anything, I swear I will." "You will," what I asked, amused. "I will use the knife I keep in my boot," she said. I laughed. "You have a knife in your boot?" "Since the engagement ended," she said seriously. I grinned. "That was my girl." "Keep the knife," I said. "I sleep better knowing you are armed." I gestured to the stairs. "Go up. First door on the right. The bathroom is stocked. Take a shower. Wash off the gala. I have some calls to make." She hesitated, then turned and started up the stairs. "Elena," I called out. She stopped halfway up and looked down at me. She looked like a queen ascending her throne. "What?" "I just wanted to tell you," I said, looking at her legs where the slit of the dress fell open. "You look good in my house." She didn't smile, but her eyes darkened. She turned and continued up the stairs. I watched her go. I waited until I heard the bedroom door click shut. Then I let out a long breath. This was going to be torture. Sleeping in the same bed with her, smelling her, knowing what she tasted like and not touching her. It was going to be hell. But I was a patient man. I had waited 6 months to get her back. I could wait a little longer for her to realize that she didn't just want my protection. She wanted me. I walked into my office and poured myself a drink. I picked up the phone. "It is done," I told the lawyer on the other end. "Transfer the funds. And send a cease and desist to Senator Sterling. Tell him if he mentions the name Vance again, I will sue him for defamation, and then I will break his legs." I hung up. I took a sip of whiskey. It burned, but it felt good. The war had started. And I had the queen. Now all I had to do was keep her.
Chapter 8. Elena. The master bedroom was not a room. It was a zip code. I stood in the center of the space, clutching my purse to my chest like a shield. The walls were painted a deep charcoal gray that should have made the room feel small, but instead made it feel infinite. There was a fireplace on the far wall large enough to roast a pig. There were floor-to-ceiling windows covered by heavy blackout curtains, and in the middle of it all sat the bed. The beast. It was a massive platform bed with a leather headboard that reached halfway to the ceiling. It looked comfortable. It also looked like a sacrificial altar. I turned in a slow circle. This was his space. Everything about it screamed Luca Moretti. It was dark, expensive, and meticulously organized. There was no clutter, no stray books on the nightstand, no dust. It was the room of a man who controlled every aspect of his environment. And now I was the chaotic variable he had introduced to the equation. A knock at the door made me jump. "Come in," I called out, my voice sounding small in the cavernous room. 2 men in black suits walked in carrying boxes. My boxes. They were labeled Master Bedroom in sharp black marker. "Where do you want these, ma'am?" one of them asked. I looked around. I didn't want them anywhere. I wanted them back in my apartment overlooking the park. I wanted my life back. Just leave them by the closet, I said. They set the boxes down and left, closing the door with a soft click. I was alone. I walked over to the boxes. I needed pajamas. I needed to get out of this dress that smelled like gala champagne and Marcus's desperation. I ripped the tape off the nearest box. Kitchen stuff. Great. I could defend myself with a spatula if necessary. I opened the second box. Shoes. I groaned. I didn't have the energy to dig through 20 boxes to find a t-shirt. I looked toward the bathroom. A sliver of light was spilling out from under the door. I walked in. If the bedroom was a zip code, the bathroom was a spa. White marble everywhere. A soaking tub that looked like a swimming pool. A glass-walled shower with more nozzles than a car wash. I turned on the shower. Steam instantly filled the room. I stripped off the black dress, leaving it in a heap on the floor. I caught my reflection in the massive mirror. I looked pale. The adrenaline from the gala had crashed, leaving me looking hollowed out. But the ring on my finger was blazing. I stepped into the shower. The water was hot and the pressure was incredible. I stood there for a long time, letting the heat soak into my bones. I washed my hair using the shampoo that was sitting on the shelf. It smelled like sandalwood and citrus. His shampoo. Great. Now I was going to smell like him too. I turned off the water and stepped out, wrapping myself in a towel that was thick and fluffy. I dried off and wrapped my hair in a second towel. I walked back into the bedroom. It was cooler in here. I shivered. I still didn't have pajamas. I looked at the massive walk-in closet on the far side of the room. The door was open. I shouldn't. It was an invasion of privacy. But he had kidnapped me. Sort of. So I figured privacy was a two-way street. I walked into the closet. It was impeccably organized. Suits on one side, shirts on the other, color-coordinated. I grabbed a white button-down shirt from the rack. It was crisp, clean cotton. I slipped it on. It swallowed me whole. The hem hit my mid-thigh and the sleeves hung past my hands. I rolled the sleeves up and buttoned it halfway. It smelled like him. Of course it did. I walked back into the bedroom just as the door handle turned. I froze. Luca walked in. He had ditched the tuxedo jacket and the tie. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing the hollow of his throat and a dusting of dark hair. He was holding a glass of amber liquid in one hand and his phone in the other. He stopped when he saw me. His eyes traveled down my legs, then up to the oversized shirt, then finally to my face. A slow, appreciative smirk spread across his lips. "That looks better on you than it does on me," he said. I crossed my arms, trying to look dignified, while wearing a stolen shirt and a towel turban. "I couldn't find my pajamas," I said defensively. "My boxes are a mess." "Consider it a gift," he said, walking over to the nightstand and setting his drink down. He sat on the edge of the bed and started to unlace his shoes. His movements were weary. He looked tired now that the show was over. The predator was off the clock. I stood by the bathroom door, unsure of what to do. Did I get in bed? Did I wait for him to turn the lights off? Did I sleep on the floor? "Are you going to stand there all night guarding the bathroom?" he asked, not looking up as he pulled off his socks. "I am assessing the perimeter," I said. He chuckled. "Come to bed, Elena. It has been a long day." I walked over to the bed. I chose the side furthest from where he was sitting. I pulled back the duvet. The sheets were gray silk. Ridiculous. Who slept on silk? I climbed in. The mattress dipped slightly under my weight. It was comfortable. Dangerously comfortable. I stayed on the very edge of the mattress, clutching the pillow like a life raft. Luca stood up. He unbuckled his belt. I squeezed my eyes shut. "What are you doing?" I squeaked. "I am taking my pants off, Elena," he said, his voice amused. "Unless you want me to sleep in dress trousers, which chafe." I kept my eyes shut. I heard the rustle of fabric, the zipper, the soft thud of clothes hitting the floor. "You can look," he said. "I am wearing boxers." I opened one eye. He was indeed wearing boxers. Black ones. Tight ones. My mouth went dry. He was fit. Incredibly fit. He had the kind of body that wasn't just built in a gym, but built for violence. Scars traced pale lines across his ribs. His arms were corded with muscle. He caught me staring. "Like what you see, princess." I snapped my eyes up to his face. "I have seen better." I lied. "Liar," he whispered. He walked around the bed and climbed in. The mattress shifted, pulling me slightly toward him. I scrambled back to my edge. He reached over and turned off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness. For a moment there was silence. I could hear the wind outside rattling the window panes. I could hear the hum of the house. and I could hear his breathing slow and steady right beside me. So I said into the dark, "We are really doing this. We are really doing this," he confirmed. I turned onto my back, staring up at the ceiling I couldn't see. "My father called me while I was in the shower," I said quietly. "He got the notification about the funds. He was crying, Luca." "He hasn't cried since my mother died." I felt Luca shift. "He is a good man, Elena. He didn't deserve to be collateral damage in Sterling's game." "Thank you," I whispered. It cost me to say it, but I meant it. "Don't thank me yet," he said, his voice raspy with sleep. "You haven't seen the bill." I frowned. I thought the marriage was the bill. "That is the down payment," he said. "Being Mrs. Moretti is a full-time job. You have a lot to learn." "I can learn," I said. "I learned how to be a senator's wife. I can learn how to be a mob wife." He laughed softly. It was a dark sound. "It is not the same, Elena. In your old life, the biggest danger was wearing the wrong season's color. In this life, the danger is real." I turned my head on the pillow. I could just make out his profile in the gloom. "I am not afraid of you," I said. He turned his head to look at me. "You should be," he said. He reached out under the covers. I tensed, expecting him to grab me, but his hand just found mine. He interlaced our fingers. His hand was warm and large, enveloping mine completely. "Where is the knife?" he asked. I blinked. "What?" "The knife in your boot. Did you bring it to bed?" I felt a bubble of laughter rise in my throat. "I put it on the nightstand," I said. "Next to the lamp." "Good," he murmured. "Keep it close." He squeezed my hand once, then relaxed his grip, though he didn't let go. "Go to sleep, Elena. We have a war to fight in the morning." I lay there for a long time, listening to his breathing even out as he drifted off. I thought I would be awake all night. I thought I would be terrified lying next to the most dangerous man in Chicago. But as the warmth from his body radiated across the sheets and the weight of his hand anchored me to the bed, I realized something strange. For the first time in 6 months, the knot of anxiety in my chest had loosened. The monster wasn't under my bed. He was in it. And somehow that was the safest I had ever felt. I closed my eyes and let the darkness take me. Chapter 9. Elena. I woke up reaching for a knife that wasn't there. My hand slapped the empty space on the nightstand where I had left the small switchblade I carried in my boot. It was gone. Panic flared in my chest for a split second before memory washed over me. The gala, the ring, the drive, the fortress. I sat up, blinking against the sunlight streaming through the gaps in the heavy blackout curtains. The bed was empty. The sheets on the left side were cold, meaning he had been up for a while. I looked around the massive charcoal bedroom. It looked even more imposing in the daylight. It looked like a bachelor pad designed by Batman, if Batman had a penchant for Italian silk and high-end thread counts. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. I was still wearing his white button-down shirt. It was wrinkled now and smelled faintly of me, mixed with the lingering scent of him. Cedar and something sharper, like gunpowder. I stood up and stretched, feeling the stiffness in my back. I hadn't slept well. Despite the comfort of the mattress, my brain had stayed on high alert all night, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Waiting for Luca to realize he had made a mistake and kick me out, or worse, demand payment for his $20 million investment. But he hadn't touched me. He had held my hand and fallen asleep like a normal person. It was infuriatingly domestic. I walked into the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked at the woman in the mirror. Her hair was a bird's nest. Her eyes were puffy. But the diamond on her finger was bright enough to signal planes. Mrs. Moretti. I tested the name on my tongue. It tasted like ash and expensive whiskey. I needed coffee, immediately. I walked back into the bedroom and found my knife sitting on the dresser across the room. I picked it up and flicked the blade out. It was sharp, comforting. I slipped it into the pocket of the oversized shirt. It wasn't exactly proper morning attire, but in a house full of mobsters, I figured accessories were open to interpretation. I opened the bedroom door and peeked into the hallway. It was empty and silent. The kind of silence that felt expensive. I padded down the hallway barefoot, my toes curling into the plush runner. I followed the smell of coffee. It was a rich, dark scent that led me down the grand staircase and through the foyer. I found the kitchen at the back of the house. It was massive. White marble countertops, stainless steel appliances that looked like they belonged in a Michelin star restaurant, and a wall of windows overlooking a sprawling garden that was currently covered in frost. And sitting at the island was Luca. He was dressed in a suit again, minus the jacket. His gun holster was strapped over his crisp white shirt, the leather stark against the fabric. He was reading a newspaper, an actual physical newspaper, and drinking from a tiny espresso cup. He didn't look up when I entered. "There is coffee in the pot," he said, his voice rough with morning. "Cups are in the cabinet to your left." I hesitated in the doorway. He looked so normal. Aside from the shoulder holster, he looked like any other husband reading the morning news. It was disorienting. I walked to the cabinet and found a mug. I poured myself a cup of black coffee. I took a sip. It was strong. Perfect. I leaned against the counter, clutching the mug with both hands. "You stole my knife," I said. Luca turned a page of the newspaper. I moved it. "You were thrashing in your sleep. I didn't want you to accidentally stab me while dreaming about your ex." "I wasn't dreaming about Marcus," I said defensively. "I was dreaming that I was falling." He finally looked up. His eyes were dark and amused. "Same thing." He folded the paper and set it aside. He looked me over, taking in the wrinkled shirt and the bare legs. His gaze was slow and heavy. It felt like a physical touch. "Sleep well, princess?" "I slept fine," I lied. "Where are my clothes?" "Your boxes are being unpacked by the staff," he said. "They will be in the dressing room by noon. Until then." He gestured vaguely at my attire. "I don't mind the current look." I rolled my eyes. "I have to go to work, Luca. I have a company to save, remember? The one you just bought." "About that." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a phone. It wasn't my phone. It was a brand new, sleek black device. He slid it across the marble counter toward me. "Your new number," he said. I stared at it. "What is wrong with my old number?" "Compromised?" he said simply. "Marcus has it. The press has it. Your old friends have it. You need a clean slate." I picked up the phone. It was already on. There was one contact saved in the address book. "Hubby." I looked at him. "Hubby," I deadpanned. "Really?" He smirked. I thought it was cute. "You are a lot of things, Luca Moretti, but cute is not one of them." He stood up. He moved with a lethal grace that made the kitchen feel suddenly very small. He walked around the island until he was standing right in front of me. He boxed me in against the counter, much like he had in the elevator. "I prefer dangerous," he murmured, leaning down. "Or capable. Or master." I scoffed, but my heart did a traitorous little flip in my chest. "I am not calling you master." "We will work on it," he said. He reached out and tucked a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my jaw. His skin was warm. "You are going to the office today," he said, his tone shifting from playful to authoritative. "Dante will drive you. He stays with you. If you go to the bathroom, he stands outside the door. If you go to a meeting, he is in the room." "That is excessive," I argued. "My employees will think I have been arrested." "Your employees will think you are protected," he corrected. "And they will be right." He dropped his hand and stepped back. I put a credit card in the phone case. "Black card, no limit. Buy yourself some clothes that aren't stolen from my closet." "I don't need your money," I said, stiffening. "I have a salary. Your salary comes from the company I own," he pointed out. "So technically it is still my money. Just spend it, Elena. It makes me look bad if my wife walks around in rags." I looked down at his shirt. I think I look quite chic. He laughed, a real low sound that vibrated in his chest. You look like trouble. He checked his watch. I have to go. I have a meeting with the union reps to explain why Vance Shipping is now under Moretti management. He grabbed his suit jacket from the back of the stool and shrugged it on, covering the gun holster. Instantly, the mobster vanished and the CEO appeared. It was a terrifying transformation. He walked to the back door. Luca, while I called out. He stopped, hand on the doorknob. He looked back over his shoulder. What? I bit my lip. Thank you. For the coffee. He winked. Don't thank me yet, princess. Wait until you see what I did to your schedule. He opened the door and walked out, leaving me alone in the silent kitchen with a new phone, a black card, and a very confusing sense of belonging. 2 hours later, I was walking into the Vance Shipping headquarters. I wasn't wearing rags. I had managed to dig a navy pencil skirt and a cream silk blouse out of one of the half-unpacked boxes before I left. I looked professional. I looked like the CEO. Except for the 6'4" wall of muscle walking 2 steps behind me. Dante was terrifying. He was bald, had a neck the size of a tree trunk, and wore sunglasses inside. He hadn't said a word to me the entire drive. He just opened doors and scanned perimeters like a robotic guard dog. As I walked through the lobby, the chatter stopped. Usually the receptionist greeted me with a smile. Today she looked at Dante, then at me, then at the ring on my finger. Her eyes widened. Good morning, Ms. Vance, she stammered. It is Mrs. Moretti now, I said loud enough for the office to hear. A ripple of whispers went through the room. I walked straight to the elevator. Dante followed. We rode up to the executive floor in silence. When I got to my office, my father was waiting. He was sitting on my sofa, looking 10 years younger than he had yesterday. The gray pallor was gone from his skin, replaced by a healthy flush. Elena, he cried, standing up and rushing over to hug me. Dad? I said, hugging him back. You look good. I feel good, he said, pulling back and holding me at arm's length. The transfer cleared this morning. The bank called to apologize. Henderson was practically groveling. He said it was a clerical error. I snorted. A $20 million clerical error. My father's smile faltered slightly as he looked at Dante, who had taken up a position by the door, arms crossed. Elena, are you okay? My father lowered his voice. This arrangement, with Moretti, is it safe? I looked at Dante. Then I looked at the ring. It is necessary, Dad. But is he hurting you? He asked, his eyes searching my face for bruises. I thought about the coffee. I thought about the hand holding mine in the dark. No, I said honestly. He isn't hurting me. He is just intense. My father sighed. He is a dangerous man, Elena. I did some digging. The stories about him. They aren't just stories. They say he took over the family business by putting his own uncle in the ground. I felt a chill run down my spine. I know who I married, Dad. My father nodded, but he didn't look convinced. Just be careful. When you dance with the devil, you eventually get burned. I walked over to my desk and sat down. I opened my laptop. I am not dancing with him, Dad. I am leading. The day was a blur of damage control. I spent 6 hours in meetings reassuring clients that Vance Shipping wasn't going under. The Moretti name carried weight. When I mentioned the new ownership, people stopped asking about our solvency and started asking very polite questions about shipping rates. Fear, it turned out, was an excellent business strategy. By 5 o'clock, I was exhausted. I started packing up my bag. Dante immediately perked up from his corner. Ready to go, ma'am? He grunted. Yes, Dante, I am ready to go home. Home. I had said it automatically. We walked out of the building. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Dante opened the back door of the SUV for me. I climbed in. Luca was sitting in the back seat. I jumped, hand flying to my chest. Jesus, I gasped. You scared me. He was working on a tablet, the blue light illuminating his sharp features. He didn't look up. You need better situational awareness, he said. You didn't even check the car before you got in. I thought that was Dante's job, I snapped, buckling my seatbelt. Dante is human. Humans make mistakes. If you want to survive, you trust no one. He finally looked at me. He looked tired, too. He had loosened his tie and unbuttoned his collar. How was your day, expecting trouble? He asked. Productive, I said. The clients are terrified of you. It is very helpful. Good, he said. Fear is currency. Spend it wisely. The car pulled out into traffic. We aren't going home, he said. I looked at him. Where are we going? Dinner, he said. I looked down at my skirt. I am not dressed for dinner? You are dressed fine. We are going to a place I own. No dress code. Why, I asked, suspicious. Because he said, closing the tablet and turning to face me fully. We need to be seen. The announcement last night was good, but people need to see us existing. They need to see the happy couple. He reached out and took my hand. His thumb traced the veins in my wrist. Can you act happy, Elena? I looked at him, at the dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. I don't know, I said. Can you act human? He laughed. Touché. The car slowed down in front of a restaurant in Little Italy. It wasn't a fancy place. It was a red sauce joint with checkered tablecloths and a line out the door. Dante opened the door. When we stepped onto the sidewalk, the line went silent. People stared. Luca put his hand on the small of my back. It was possessive, firm, and warm. Walk like you own the sidewalk, he whispered in my ear. I straightened my spine. I lifted my chin. I walked into that restaurant with the devil at my side, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the victim of the story. I felt like the villain, and I liked it.
Chapter 10. Luca. The silence that fell over Giovanni's when we walked in was my favorite sound. It was the sound of respect mixed with a healthy dose of terror. Forks paused halfway to mouths. Conversations died in throats. The air left the room. Beside me, Elena didn't flinch. In fact, she seemed to grow taller. She kept her chin high and her hand resting lightly on the small of my back, a mirror of my own possession. She walked through the parted sea of tables like she had been doing this her whole life. She was a natural. I guided her to the corner booth, the one that faced the door. It was always reserved for me. The red leather was worn but clean, and the tablecloth was pristine white. Giovanni, the owner, rushed out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a stained apron. He was a short, round man who had known me since I was stealing cannoli from his counter at age 10. Luca, he breathed, his eyes darting to Elena. And the Signora. What an honor. We heard the news. Congratulations. Thank you, Gio, I said, sliding into the booth. We are celebrating. Bring us the usual, and a bottle of the Barolo, the good stuff from the cellar, not the vinegar you serve the tourists. Giovanni laughed nervously. Of course, boss. Immediately. He scurried away. I turned my attention to Elena. She was sliding into the booth opposite me. She looked out of place in her silk blouse and pencil skirt, surrounded by guys in tracksuits and leather jackets. But she also looked like the most dangerous thing in the room. She picked up the menu but didn't open it. You come here often? She asked, scanning the room. I grew up 3 blocks from here, I said. This is my kitchen. She looked at the man at the next table who was studiously avoiding eye contact with us. They are terrified of you, she noted. They are respectful, I corrected. She raised an eyebrow. Is there a difference in your world? Not really, I admitted. Giovanni returned with the wine. He poured it with shaking hands. Elena took a sip. Her eyes lit up. Okay, she said. That is good wine. It costs more than your ex-fiancé's car, I said. She smirked. You really hate him, don't you? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. I hate what he represents, Elena. He is a man who thinks power comes from a title or a vote. He thinks he can buy loyalty with tax cuts. He is soft. And you, she asked. You are hard. I held her gaze. The air between us crackled. It was that same electricity I had felt in the office 6 months ago. The kind that made me want to clear the table and finish what we started. I am real, I said. My power doesn't come from a ballot box. It comes from the fact that everyone in this room knows exactly what I am capable of, and they know I keep my word. The food arrived before she could respond. Massive platters of pasta glistening with red sauce meatballs the size of softballs and crusty bread that smelled like heaven. We ate. It wasn't a polite dinner. We ate with gusto, tearing into the bread, drinking the wine. There was something primal about it. You have sauce on your lip, I said after a few minutes. She went to wipe it with her napkin. No, I said, stopping her hand. I reached across the table. I used my thumb to wipe the drop of sauce from the corner of her mouth. Then I brought my thumb to my own lips and licked it off. Her pupils blew wide. Her breath hitched. The tension at the table spiked. I could feel the heat radiating off her. She wasn't scared. She was turned on. You are trying to intimidate me, she whispered. Is it working? I asked. She leaned in. It is making me want to skip dessert. I almost groaned. She was playing with fire and she knew it. Before I could drag her out of the booth and take her home to test that theory, the mood shifted. I felt it before I saw it. A change in the air pressure of the room. The conversation at the front of the restaurant didn't just die down, it stopped abruptly. I looked up. 3 men had walked in. They weren't locals. They were wearing suits that were too shiny, and they walked with the swagger of men who thought they were important, but didn't know the territory. One of them was tall, with a nose that had been broken a few times. I recognized him. Vinny the Rat Moretti. No relation. Just a low-level enforcer for a rival crew who had been sniffing around my docks lately. He spotted me. He smiled. It was a bad smile. He walked over to our table, ignoring the sudden silence of the room. His 2 goons flanked him. Dante stepped forward from the shadows by the door, but I held up a hand. Let him come, Luca, Vinny said, stopping at the edge of our table. Enjoying a family dinner, I see. He looked at Elena. His eyes raked over her with a disrespect that made my blood run cold. So this is the famous bride, he sneered. The senator's leftovers. The restaurant went deathly still. Giovanni disappeared into the kitchen. The other diners looked down at their plates, praying to become invisible. I slowly set my fork down. I wiped my mouth with my napkin. I didn't look at Vinny. I looked at Elena. I wanted to see what she would do. Most women would shrink. They would look down. They would cry. Elena picked up her wine glass. She took a slow, leisurely sip. Then she looked Vinny dead in the eye. Leftovers imply something was discarded, she said, her voice cool and steady. I wasn't discarded. I walked away. There is a difference. Perhaps if you had ever had a woman stay with you voluntarily, you would know that. Vinny's face turned purple. Watch your mouth, bitch! He snarled, taking a step toward her. That was the line. I moved. It happened in a blur of motion. I didn't stand up. I didn't draw my gun. I simply reached out, grabbed Vinny's hand where it rested on the table and slammed it down against the wood. I grabbed the steak knife from my plate and drove it down. The blade went through the webbing between his thumb and index finger and buried itself an inch deep into the table. Vinny screamed. It was a high-pitched, gurgling sound. His 2 goons reached for their jackets, but Dante and 2 of my other men were already there, guns pressed against their spines before they could even twitch. I leaned back in the booth, keeping my hand on the handle of the knife, pinning Vinny to the table. He was sobbing now, snot running down his face. "You interrupted my wife," I said, my voice conversational. "Please, Luca, I didn't mean," Vinny blubbered. I twisted the knife slightly. He howled. "Apologize," I said. I am sorry," he gasped. "I am sorry, Mrs. Moretti." I looked at Elena. She wasn't looking at Vinny. She was looking at me. Her eyes weren't filled with horror. They were filled with fascination. She was looking at my hand on the knife. She was looking at the violence, and she wasn't turning away. Like calls to like. "Is his apology accepted, Elena?" I asked. She looked at Vinny, who was sweating and bleeding on the white tablecloth. She took another sip of wine. "He is bleeding on the linens," she said. "It is rude." I laughed. "Get him out of here," I told Dante, "and take the finger, as a reminder." Dante dragged the screaming man out the back door. The two goons followed, hands raised in surrender. Giovanni appeared instantly with a fresh tablecloth and a new bottle of wine. He was pale but efficient. Within 30 seconds, the table was clean, the knife was gone, and the blood was erased. The restaurant slowly came back to life. Forks started moving again. The hum of conversation returned, though it was quieter now. I looked at Elena. She was calm. She cut a piece of her meatball and ate it. "You are insane," she said, chewing thoughtfully. I picked up my glass. "You didn't look away." She swallowed. "I told you, Luca. I'm tired of being good. Good girls look away. I wanted to see what? To see if you would really protect me." "And?" She reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers traced the knuckles that had just driven a knife into wood. "You missed a spot," she whispered, pointing to a speck of blood on my cuff. I stared at her. My heart hammered against my ribs, not from adrenaline, but from something else. Something far more dangerous. I was falling for her. I signaled for the check. "We are leaving," I said, my voice rough. "Why?" she asked, innocent. "We haven't had dessert." "You are dessert," I growled, standing up and pulling her with me. I threw a stack of hundreds on the table. We walked out of the restaurant. The cool night air hit us, but it did nothing to cool the heat between us. Dante was waiting by the car, wiping his hands on a rag. "Problem solved, boss," he said. "Good. Drive us home. Fast." We got in the back of the SUV. The door closed. Before the car even started moving, I pulled Elena into my lap. She didn't resist. She straddled me, her skirt riding up her thighs. She wrapped her arms around my neck and crashed her lips against mine. She tasted like wine and danger. I kissed her back, hungry and desperate. My hands roamed over her body, claiming every inch. "You are a monster," she whispered against my lips. I know I groaned, biting her neck. "But you are my monster," she finished. And in that moment, in the back of an armored SUV speeding through the streets of Chicago, I knew she was right. I was a monster. But for her, I would be the devil himself.
Chapter 11. Elena. The drive home was a blur. It was a chaotic mix of Han's breath and the smell of leather and violence. Luca's mouth was on my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin right below my ear, while his hand was dangerously high on my thigh. I wasn't thinking. If I had been thinking, I would have been terrified. I had just watched a man get stabbed with a steak knife over an insult. I should have been curled in a ball, hyperventilating. I should have been demanding to be taken to a police station. Instead, I was straddling the man who held the knife, trying to get closer to him. Dante cleared his throat from the front seat. He turned the radio up. The soft strains of classical music filled the car, doing absolutely nothing to drown out the sound of Luca's zipper. "We are 5 minutes out," Dante announced, his voice sounding strained. Luca pulled back. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. His lips were swollen and red. My fault. He looked wrecked. He looked magnificent. He adjusted my skirt, pulling it down over my thighs with a rough proprietary tug. "Behave," he whispered, his voice a low growl that vibrated against my chest. "Or I will have to finish this right here in front of my head of security." I smoothed my hair down my hands, shaking. "You started it?" I breathed. He smirked, that arrogant, devilish smirk that made my knees weak. "I am going to finish it too." The car slowed as we passed through the iron gates. The drive up to the fortress felt like it took hours. The moment the SUV stopped in front of the steps, Luca had the door open. He didn't wait for Dante. He didn't wait for me to climb out. He reached in, grabbed my hand, and pulled me out. I stumbled slightly in my heels, but his arm was instantly around my waist, steadying me, anchoring me. Inside, he barked to Dante, not looking back. We walked up the steps. No, we ran. It was a frantic race to the door. Luca fumbled with the keys for a second, the first time I had ever seen his hands lack precision, before the lock clicked. He kicked the door open and dragged me inside. The foyer was empty. The house was silent. He didn't stop. He pulled me toward the stairs. My heels clicked loudly on the marble, echoing in the vast space. "Luca!" I gasped, trying to catch my breath as we reached the landing. "Bedroom," he said. "Now." We burst into the master suite. He kicked the door shut behind us with a resounding thud that shook the walls. Then he pinned me against it. His hands were everywhere, in my hair, on my waist, gripping my hips. He kissed me like he was trying to devour me. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw hunger. It was the release of all the tension that had been building since the moment I walked into his office that morning. I kissed him back, matching his intensity. I clawed at his shirt, popping a button. I needed to feel his skin. I needed to know he was real. Suddenly he stopped. He pulled back, his chest heaving. He grabbed my wrists and pinned them to the door above my head. "Stop," he ordered. I froze, panting. "What?" "Look at me, Elena." I looked at him. His face was hard, his jaw clenched tight enough to snap. "You are high," he said. "You are running on adrenaline. You just saw me hurt a man. You are confused." I shook my head, trying to free my hands. "I am not confused." "You should be scared," he said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You should be running for the hills." "I am a monster, Elena. I just proved it to you." I stopped fighting his grip. I looked him dead in the eye. He was giving me an out. He was offering me a chance to retreat, to claim moral superiority, to go sleep in the guest room and pretend this marriage was just business. I didn't want the out. I wasn't scared, I said, my voice steady. He stared at me, searching for the lie. "You aren't scared that I enjoyed it." "No." "Why?" "Because you did it for me," I whispered. Something in his eyes fractured. The wall of ice he kept around himself cracked just a little. "I spent 2 years with a man who wouldn't even raise his voice to defend me," I said, the words tumbling out. "A man who let his mother criticize my weight. A man who let the press tear me apart. A man who valued his polling numbers more than my dignity." I leaned forward, closing the inch of space between us. "You didn't ask me to be quiet. You didn't ask me to be polite. You put a knife through a table because someone disrespected your wife." I took a breath. "I don't want a Saint Luca. I want the monster, because the monsters are the only ones strong enough to keep the wolves away." Luca stared at me for a long heartbeat. Then he let go of my wrists. His hands cupped my face, holding me like I was something precious and breakable. "I will kill for you, Elena," he said. "You know that now." "I know. I will burn this whole city down if anyone touches you." "I know." "Then know this." He lowered his head until his forehead rested against mine. "Once we do this, once I take you to that bed, there is no going back. You are mine, in every way that matters. No more separate sides of the mattress. No more walls." I reached up and ran my fingers through his dark hair. "I was yours the minute I put on the ring, Luca. Stop talking and claim your wife." He growled a low, animalistic sound. He swept me up into his arms. I wrapped my legs around his waist, burying my face in the crook of his neck, inhaling the scent of him. He carried me to the massive bed and laid me down on the gray silk sheets. He didn't undress me slowly. He didn't tease. He was a man on a mission. My skirt was gone in seconds. My blouse followed. He stood at the edge of the bed, stripping off his clothes with efficient, brutal movements. When he was naked, he looked like a god of war carved from marble and scarred by battle. He climbed over me, caging me in with his arms. He kissed me again, and this time it was slower, deeper. It was a promise. He worshipped my body. His hands were rough, but his touch was reverent. He explored every curve, every scar, every shiver. He made me feel beautiful. Not the polite, sanitized beauty of a politician's wife, but the wild, untamed beauty of a woman who has found her match. When he finally entered me, I cried out. It wasn't pain. It was the feeling of being filled, of being complete. He moved with a rhythm that was punishing and perfect. I dug my nails into his shoulders, marking him. I wanted to leave scars on him just like the ones he was leaving on my soul. Look at me, he commanded, his voice strained. I opened my eyes. Say it, he rasped. What? Say who you belong to. I looked into his black eyes. I saw my reflection there. I looked wild. I looked free. You, I gasped. I belong to you. He thrust harder, driving the breath from my lungs. Again, I am yours, Luca. Only yours. He shattered then. He buried his face in my neck, groaning my name like a prayer. I followed him over the edge, my body convulsing in waves of pleasure that were so intense they bordered on pain. We collapsed together, a tangle of limbs and sweat and heavy breathing. The room was silent again, save for the sound of our hearts beating in sync. Luca rolled his weight off me, but he didn't go far. He pulled me against his chest, wrapping his arm around me like a vice. He pulled the duvet up over us, cocooning us in the dark. I lay there listening to the steady thump of his heart. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt ashamed. I had just had sex with a mob boss who had maimed a man an hour ago. But all I felt was safe. Safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. I shifted slightly, resting my chin on his chest so I could look at him. His eyes were closed, his breathing slowing down. He looked younger when he slept. Less like the devil. Luca, I whispered. He grunted, not opening his eyes. You owe Giovanni a new table. One eye cracked open. A lazy smile spread across his lips. I own the building, Elena. I think he will let it slide. I traced the scar on his shoulder with my fingertip. What happened here? Knife fight, he said. I was 19. And this one, I asked, tracing a jagged line on his ribs. Bullet, he said. 22. I moved my hand to his chest, right over his heart. There were no scars there, just smooth skin and muscle. And here. He caught my hand. He brought my knuckles to his lips and kissed them right over the diamond ring. That one is new, he said, looking at me. I frowned. There is no scar there. Not yet, he said softly. But you will leave one. I can feel it. I didn't know what to say to that. It was the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone had ever said to me. I won't hurt you, Luca, I promised. He chuckled, closing his eyes again. You will, princess. But it will be worth it. He pulled me closer, tucking my head under his chin. Go to sleep. I closed my eyes, letting the darkness of the room and the warmth of his body surround me. My life was a mess. My company was in debt. My ex-fiancé was a vengeful sociopath. And I was married to a criminal. But as I drifted off to sleep, wrapped in the arms of the devil, I realized something. I wouldn't trade it for anything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And God, the fire felt good.
Chapter 12. Luca. I didn't want to leave the bed. For the first time in my adult life, the idea of getting up, putting on a suit, and going to run the city felt like a burden. I wanted to stay right here under the gray silk sheets with Elena wrapped around me. She was fast asleep. Her hair was a chaotic halo spread across my pillow, and her lips were slightly parted. There was a faint purple mark on her neck where I had bitten her last night. Possession. I traced the mark with my thumb lightly enough not to wake her. She shifted, mumbling something incoherent, and threw an arm across my chest. Her hand rested over my heart, the diamond ring cold against my warm skin. I looked at the clock. 7 a.m. I had a sit-down with the cartel representatives in an hour. It was a meeting I couldn't miss, not with the recent expansion of the shipping lanes. I carefully disentangled myself from her. She made a noise of protest, a soft whimper that almost made me climb back in and tell the cartel to go to hell. But I had promised her protection, and protection required power, and power required maintenance. I showered quickly and dressed in silence. Charcoal suit, white shirt, black tie. I strapped the holster on, checking the Sig Sauer. It was a ritual I had performed 1,000 times, but today it felt heavier, because today I had something to lose. I walked back to the bed. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Stay here," I whispered, even though she was asleep. "Be safe." I walked out of the room. Dante was waiting in the hall. He had a bandage on his hand from where he had handled the trash at the restaurant, but otherwise he looked ready for war. "She stays in the house today, Dante," I said. "No office, no shopping. I don't like the chatter on the streets. Sterling is too quiet." Dante nodded, his face grim. "Understood, boss. I have a team on the perimeter and 2 guys in the kitchen." I walked down the stairs. I had a bad feeling. It was an itch in the back of my skull, the kind that usually preceded a bullet. I stopped at the front door. "Keep her inside," I repeated. "I won't let her out of my sight," Dante promised. I nodded and walked out to the car. I should have stayed. I should have listened to the itch. But I was arrogant. I thought the walls of my fortress were high enough. I thought I had scared Marcus Sterling into submission. I was wrong. POV Elena. I woke up alone again, but this time there was a note on the pillow. "Business. Back by dinner. Stay inside. Elham." I smiled, stretching my limbs. My body ached in places I didn't know could ache. My muscles felt loose, heavy with the memory of the night before. I got up and showered, putting on the clothes that the staff had finally unpacked. A pair of jeans and a soft cashmere sweater. It felt like armor against the chill of the big house. I went downstairs. The house was quiet, but alive with security. I counted 3 guards just on the walk to the kitchen. Dante was standing by the coffee machine, looking miserable. "Morning, Dante," I said, pouring a cup. "How is the hand?" "It is fine, Mrs. Moretti." He grunted. I leaned against the counter. "So what is the plan for today?" "Prison lockdown. Luca's orders," he said. "You don't leave the grounds." I sighed. I knew he was trying to protect me, but I felt restless. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my father. "Elena, are you okay? I haven't heard from you since the announcement. The news is saying terrible things." I frowned. I dialed his number. "Dad?" "L." His voice sounded thin. "Thank God." I saw the news. They are saying Marcus is launching an investigation into the company. Allegations of money laundering. He is trying to freeze the accounts again. I gripped the phone. "He can't do that." "The debt is paid. He is saying the money came from illegal sources, L. He is saying you are complicit." I don't know what to do. The auditors are here now." He sounded on the verge of a panic attack. My father had a heart condition. Stress like this could kill him. "I am coming," I said instantly. Mrs. Moretti Dante interrupted, stepping forward. "You can't leave." I ignored him. "Dad, just breathe. Do not let them touch any files. I will be there in 20 minutes with the lawyers." I hung up. "Dante," I said, turning to him. My father is in trouble. Marcus sent auditors. I have to go. Boss said no leaving the grounds, Dante said, crossing his massive arms. I walked up to him. I wasn't tall, but I channeled every ounce of authority I had learned from Luca in the last 24 hours. My father could have a heart attack, Dante. If he dies because I was sitting here drinking coffee, I will never forgive myself. And I will make sure Luca knows you stopped me. Dante hesitated. He saw the desperation in my eyes. We call Luca first, he said. He is in a meeting with the cartel, I said, remembering his schedule. He won't answer. You drive me. We take the armored SUV, we go in, we get my dad, we come back. 1 hour, Dante weighed the options. He looked at my face, then at his phone, then back at me. 1 hour, he grunted. And we take the detail. Fine. Let's go. We took the SUV. 2 other cars flanked us. It felt like a presidential motorcade. I sat in the back, clutching my phone, praying my father was okay. We were on the highway, moving fast. The city skyline was looming ahead, gray and jagged against the sky. We took the exit for the shipping district. It was an industrial area full of warehouses and narrow roads. Dante was tense. He was checking the mirrors constantly. Traffic is backed up, he muttered. I looked ahead. A garbage truck was stalled across the 2 lanes, blocking the underpass. Go around, I said. Can't, Dante said, his hand dropping to his gun. Walls on both sides. The convoy stopped. Dante spoke into his radio. Red team check the truck. Blue team eyes on the ridge. Then it happened. The back of the garbage truck didn't just open, it exploded. A concussive blast shook the SUV, screamed, covering my head as debris rained down on the roof. Ambush, Dante roared. Get down! Gunfire erupted. It sounded like popcorn popping, but louder, deadlier. Bullets pinged against the armored glass, spiderwebbing the windows. Dante threw the car into reverse, but the car behind us had been hit. It was burning, blocking our retreat. We were trapped. Dante unbuckled his seatbelt. Stay down, Elena, he shouted. Do not open this door. He kicked his door open, using it as a shield, and started firing. I curled into a ball on the floorboards, my hands over my ears. The noise was deafening. Screams, metal on metal, the roar of automatic weapons. Suddenly, the driver's side door was ripped open. Dante turned, firing 2 shots, but he was hit. I saw blood spray from his shoulder. He fell back against the steering wheel, groaning. No! I screamed, reaching for him. A hand grabbed my ankle. I kicked out blindly, connecting with something hard. A man cursed. Get her out, someone shouted. I scrambled back, trying to reach the door handle on the other side, but the child lock was on. I was trapped in the cage that was supposed to save me. The door was wrenched open. A man in tactical gear wearing a balaclava grabbed my arm. Let go of me, I yelled. I remembered the knife. I reached into my boot. My fingers closed around the handle. I pulled it out and swung. The blade sliced through the fabric of his sleeve. He yelled in pain and let go. She has a knife, he shouted. I scrambled backward, trying to get to Dante's gun, but I wasn't fast enough. Something hard hit the back of my head. A rifle butt. Pain exploded in my skull. White-hot, blinding pain. My vision swam. I fell back against the seat, the knife slipping from my fingers. Grab her. Go, go, go. Rough hands grabbed me, dragging me out of the car. My feet dragged on the asphalt. I tried to fight, but my limbs felt like lead. I saw Dante trying to lift his gun, his hand shaking, blood pooling on his chest. Elena, he wheezed. I looked up at the gray sky. I saw the face of the man dragging me. He pulled his mask down to spit. He wasn't a mercenary. I recognized him from the gala. He was Marcus's head of security. Tell Luca, I whispered before the darkness took me. Tell him to burn it all. POV Luca, The meeting was going poorly. The cartel representative, a man named Hector, was trying to renegotiate the percentages on the shipment coming in from Veracruz. He was being greedy. I was about to tell him exactly where he could shove his percentages when my phone rang. It was the emergency line, the one that bypassed all filters. The room went silent. You didn't interrupt a sit-down for a phone call unless someone was dead. I held up a hand to Hector. I answered. Moretti. Boss. It was one of the perimeter guards. His voice was panicked. There was a firefight on the I-90 off-ramp. Dante's convoy. My blood turned to ice. Dante is at the house, I said calmly, though my hand was gripping the phone hard enough to crack the screen. No, boss. They left 20 minutes ago. Mrs. Moretti, she went to get her father. They got hit. I didn't say a word. I didn't breathe. I stood up. Hector started to speak. Luca, we are not finished. I pulled my gun and shot Hector in the knee. He screamed, collapsing to the floor. His guards drew their weapons, but my men were faster. Meeting adjourned, I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a grave. I walked out of the room, stepping over the writhing man. Get the car, I told my driver. We drove. I didn't care about speed limits. I didn't care about red lights. I drove like a man possessed. When I got to the underpass, the police were already there. Fire trucks were spraying foam on the burning wreckage of the lead car. I slammed the Mercedes into park and got out. Sir, you can't be here, a cop shouted, running toward me. I looked at him. One look. He stopped. He recognized me. Or maybe he just recognized death when he saw it. He stepped back. I walked through the smoke. I found the SUV. It was riddled with bullets. The tires were blown out. Dante was sitting on the ground, leaning against the barrier. Paramedics were working on his shoulder. He looked pale, like he had lost half his blood volume. He looked up when he saw me. Boss, he croaked. Where is she? I asked. Dante closed his eyes. A tear leaked out, mixing with the grime on his face. They were pros, Luca. A garbage truck block. Flashbangs. I tried to hold them off. Where is she? I repeated louder. They took her. A black van. No plates. Heading east. I looked into the back of the SUV. It was empty. Except for one thing. Lying on the floor mat, glinting in the flashing lights of the police cruisers, was a small silver switchblade. The tip was stained with blood. She had fought. My brave, foolish girl had fought. I picked up the knife. I wiped the blood on my thumb. I turned to the cop who was standing nervously nearby. Who did this? I asked. We don't know, Mr. Moretti. Witnesses say it was paramilitary. No IDs. I knew. I didn't need witnesses. I didn't need license plates. I knew exactly who was desperate enough to hire mercenaries to hit a mob convoy in broad daylight. Marcus Sterling. He thought he had leverage. He thought that by taking her, he could force me to back down. He thought he could use her as a bargaining chip to get his reputation back. He had made a fatal miscalculation. Elena wasn't leverage. She was the trigger. I walked back to my car. I dialed my second in command. Wake everyone up, I said. Who do we hit, boss? He asked. Everyone, I said. Call the Russians, call the Irish, tell them the Moretti family is going to war, close the city, shut down the bridges, block the tunnels. Nothing leaves Chicago. But the police. I don't care about the police. I roared, slamming my fist against the roof of the car, denting the metal. I want every street corner watched. I want every warehouse searched. I got into the car. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather groaning under my hands. Find Marcus Sterling, I whispered into the phone. Do not kill him. Bring him to me. I looked at the bloody knife in my hand. I am going to peel the skin from his body 1 inch at a time. I started the car. The engine roared. You wanted a monster, Elena. I am coming.
Chapter 13. Elena. I woke up to the taste of copper and the smell of rot. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. The throbbing was a rhythmic, nauseating beat behind my eyes. I tried to move my hands to touch the sore spot on my skull, but my wrists were fused together. Zip ties, tight, cutting into the circulation. I blinked my eyes open, fighting the blurriness. I was in a chair. A metal folding chair bolted to a concrete floor. The room was vast, dim, and smelled of diesel and dead fish. A warehouse. Probably one of the abandoned ones near the old Navy yards that the city had been trying to gentrify for a decade. You're awake. The voice was familiar. It used to sound like safety. Now it sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I lifted my head. It felt heavy, like a bowling ball on a toothpick neck. Marcus stood in front of me. He looked terrible. The golden boy senator was gone. His tie was loose, his shirt was stained with sweat, and his eyes were manic. He was pacing back and forth, running a hand through his perfect hair, messing it up into frantic spikes. Water, I croaked. My throat was like sandpaper. You don't get water, Elena, Marcus shouted, spinning on his heel. You get to listen. You get to fix this mess you made. I looked around. 2 men in tactical gear stood by the metal doors. They held assault rifles loosely, looking bored. Mercenaries. The ones who had shot Dante. I felt a spike of rage cut through the pain in my head. Dante, I whispered. Is he... The bodyguard? Marcus waved a hand dismissively. Who cares? He was collateral damage, necessary casualties. He walked up to me, grabbing my chin and forcing me to look at him. His fingers dug into my jaw. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? He hissed. My poll numbers are in the toilet. The party is talking about pulling my funding. The investigation into Vance shipping was supposed to be my win. I was supposed to be the crusader cleaning up corruption. Instead, you marry the corruption. I stared at him. He was delusional. He was talking about poll numbers while I was tied to a chair with dried blood on my hairline. You kidnapped me, Marcus, I said, my voice gaining a little strength. This isn't a PR crisis. It's a felony. It's a negotiation, he screamed, letting go of my face. He paced away again, gesturing wildly. I have a plan. We draft a statement. You say Moretti forced you. You say he drugged you, threatened your father. We annul the marriage. I rescue you. I look like a hero. You look like a victim. And Moretti goes to prison for kidnapping. It's perfect. I started to laugh. It hurt my ribs, but I couldn't stop. It was a dark, jagged sound that bounced off the concrete walls. Marcus stopped pacing. He looked at me with genuine confusion. Why are you laughing? Because, I wheezed, leaning back in the uncomfortable chair. You think you're still playing politics. You think you can spin this. I looked him dead in the eye. You didn't kidnap a socialite, Marcus. You kidnapped Luca Moretti's wife. You didn't start a scandal. You started a war. Marcus sneered. Moretti is a thug. He's a brute in a suit. I have the police commissioner on speed dial. I have federal agents waiting to raid his house. He can't touch me. He doesn't need the police, I said softly. He won't call the cops, Marcus. He won't sue you. He's going to come through that door, and he is going to kill everyone in this room. Marcus paled slightly, but he shook his head. He doesn't know where we are. This building is under a shell corporation owned by a shell corporation. It's a ghost. Boom. The sound wasn't a knock. It was a concussion. The massive metal rolling door at the far end of the warehouse didn't just open. It buckled. A massive black truck, an armored battering ram, smashed through the metal like it was tin foil. Dust and debris exploded into the air. The screech of tearing metal was deafening. The 2 mercenaries by the door didn't even have time to raise their rifles. The truck didn't stop. It plowed through the crates, drifting sideways, creating a wall of steel between the entrance and the center of the room. Marcus screamed, stumbling back. What is that? Stop them! The mercenaries opened fire on the truck. Bullets sparked harmlessly off the reinforced plating. Then the lights went out. Someone had cut the power. The warehouse plunged into gloom, lit only by the headlights of the truck cutting through the swirling dust. Then the shooting started. It wasn't the chaotic spray of the mercenaries. It was precise. Pop, 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 pop. I saw muzzle flashes from the shadows in the rafters. Snipers. One mercenary dropped, his chest exploding red. The other spun around, firing blindly into the dark, before a single shot took him in the throat. He gurgled and fell. Silence. Heavy, terrifying silence. Marcus scrambled backward, pulling a small handgun from his waistband. He grabbed the back of my chair, hauling me up. "Get up!" he shrieked. "Stand up!" He dragged me backward, pressing the barrel of the gun against my temple. He was shaking so hard the metal chattered against my skull. "I'll kill her!" Marcus screamed into the darkness. "I swear to God, Moretti, I'll blow her brains out!" From the cloud of dust near the truck, a shadow emerged. He walked slowly. He wasn't running. He wasn't taking cover. He walked with the terrifying confidence of a man who knows he is the apex predator. Luca stepped into the beam of the headlights. He was a mess. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt was stained with soot and blood. Not his, I guessed. He held a gun in each hand, hanging loosely at his sides. His face was a mask of cold fury. His eyes were black holes. "Hello, Marcus," Luca said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried perfectly in the echo chamber. "Stay back," Marcus yelled, jamming the gun harder into my head. "I mean it. I have leverage. Let us walk out, and she lives." Luca stopped 10 feet away. He holstered one gun. He looked at me. He didn't look at the gun at my head. He looked at my face. He saw the blood. He saw the zip ties. His jaw ticked. "You hurt her," Luca said. It wasn't a question. It was a sentence. "She's fine," Marcus babbled. Just back off. We can make a deal. Money? You want territory? I can get you the zoning permits for the south side." Luca took another step. "I don't want permits, Marcus. I want your skin." "Stop!" Marcus shrieked. He shifted his grip, moving his arm around my neck to choke me, using my body as a human shield. I couldn't breathe. The zip ties dug into my wrists. I felt helpless. No, I wasn't helpless. I remembered the restaurant. I remembered the knife. I remembered Luca telling me, "You are the weapon." Marcus was focused on Luca. He was terrified of the monster in front of him. He wasn't paying attention to the victim in his arms. I waited. Luca took another step. Marcus flinched, his body tensing. Now. I threw my weight back. I didn't try to pull away. I slammed my head backward with every ounce of strength I had. My skull connected with Marcus's nose. There was a sickening crunch. Marcus howled, his grip loosening instinctively, as blood gushed from his broken face. His gun hand wavered. That split second was all Luca needed. He didn't shoot Marcus. That would have been too quick. He fired a single shot. The bullet hit Marcus's right hand, the hand holding the gun. Marcus screamed, dropping the weapon. His hand was a ruin of red mist and shattered bone. I threw myself to the floor, rolling away from him. Luca was on him before he hit the ground. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Luca tackled Marcus, driving him into the concrete. He didn't use his gun. He used his fists. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of fist-meeting flesh was wet and heavy. Marcus was screaming, begging. "Stop! Please, I'm a senator. You can't—" "You touched my wife," Luca roared, landing a blow that shattered Marcus's jaw. He grabbed Marcus by the lapels of his ruined shirt and hauled him up, slamming him back against the concrete pillar. Marcus slid down, a sobbing, broken mess. He looked up at Luca through swollen eyes. I can fix this," Marcus gurgled, spitting teeth. Luca stood over him. He looked like a demon. He adjusted his cuffs, his chest heaving. He looked over at me. "Elena," he said, his voice surprisingly steady. "Turn around." I lay on the floor, breathing hard. My wrists were still bound. No, I said. Luca looked at me. Turn around, baby. You don't need to see this. I told you, I rasped, pushing myself up to a sitting position. I don't look away. Luca stared at me for a long moment. Respect flared in his eyes. He nodded. He turned back to Marcus. You wanted to be a hero, Marcus, Luca said, pulling his Sig Sauer from his holster. But heroes die. Luca, wait, Marcus begged, raising his good hand. Luca didn't wait. Tell the devil I sent you. Bang. One shot, center of the forehead. Marcus Sterling slumped back against the pillar. The senator from Illinois was dead. The silence rushed back into the room, ringing in my ears. Luca holstered his weapon. He turned immediately to me. He was on his knees in front of me in a second. His hands, bloody, bruised, shaking slightly, reached for me. Elena, he breathed. Elena, look at me. I looked at him. I saw the soot on his cheek. I saw the terror in his eyes that hadn't been there when he was killing Marcus. I'm okay, I whispered. He hit you, Luca said, his fingers ghosting over the bruise on my temple. His voice broke. I was too slow. You were right on time, I said. He pulled a knife from his boot, the twin to the one I had lost. With a quick, precise movement, he sliced the zip ties from my wrists. My hands fell free. The rush of blood was painful. I reached out and grabbed his face. I smeared his own blood on his cheek, but I didn't care. Dante? I asked. Alive, Luca said, pulling me into his chest. He's in surgery. He'll make it. He's too stubborn to die. I buried my face in his neck. I started to shake. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving me cold and trembling. I was so scared, I admitted, my voice muffled by his shirt. Not of dying. I was scared I'd never see you again. Luca gripped me tighter, crushing me against him. He rocked me back and forth slightly. I told you, he whispered fiercely into my hair. I would burn the city down. I would tear the world apart to find you. He stood up, lifting me into his arms like I weighed nothing. We're leaving, he announced to the shadows. Dozens of his men emerged from the darkness, guns lowered. They formed a protective circle around us. Burn it, Luca ordered over his shoulder as he carried me toward the truck. Leave nothing but ash. As we walked out into the cool night air, behind us, the warehouse began to glow. Flames licked up the walls, consuming the evidence, the bodies, and the last remnants of my old life. I rested my head on Luca's shoulder, watching the fire reflect in his dark eyes. My ex-fiancé was dead. My father's company was saved, and I was being carried away by a murderer. I closed my eyes and held on tight. Let it burn. POV Luca. I carried her out of the fire. She was light in my arms, but the weight of what had almost happened was crushing my chest. I had almost lost her. If I had been 5 minutes later. I looked down at her. Her face was dirty, bruised, and beautiful. She was asleep, or passed out from exhaustion, her hand gripping my shirt collar in a death grip. I walked past the police cars that had finally arrived at the perimeter. The cops saw us. They saw the fire. They saw the dead bodies of the mercenaries scattered outside. They didn't stop me. One officer took a step forward. But his partner grabbed his arm and shook his head. They knew better. Tonight, the laws of Chicago didn't apply. Tonight, it was just jungle law. I reached the black SUV waiting for us. My driver opened the door. I slid into the back seat, keeping Elena in my lap. I refused to put her down. I refused to let go of her for even a second. Home, I ordered. The car pulled away. I pulled out my phone with one hand. I dialed the cleaner. The warehouse is burning, I said. Make sure the coroner knows it was a drug deal gone bad. Sterling was buying. The mercenaries were selling. It went south. Understood, Mr. Moretti. I hung up. I looked down at Elena. She stirred, wincing slightly. Luca? She mumbled. I'm here, baby, I soothed, brushing the hair from her sticky forehead. We're going home. Did we win? She asked sleepily. I looked at the blood on my knuckles. I looked at the woman in my arms. Yeah, I whispered, kissing the top of her head. We won. But looking at the bruise on her temple, I knew the war wasn't over. It was never over. There would always be another enemy, another threat. But next time, they wouldn't just face the devil. They would face the devil and his queen. And God help anyone who tried to come between us.
Chapter 14. Luca. The water in the shower was turning pink. It swirled around the drain, carrying away the soot from the warehouse, the dirt from the floor, and the blood of a United States senator. I stood under the spray, letting the hot water beat against my back, but my eyes were fixed on the woman sitting on the marble bench opposite me. Elena was wrapped in a towel, her knees drawn up to her chest. She wasn't washing. She was just staring at the steam rising from the floor tiles. There was a nasty bruise blooming on her temple, a violent shade of purple against her pale skin. Her wrists were chafed raw from the zip ties. I hated looking at them. Every mark on her skin was a failure on my part. A reminder that I had been too slow, too arrogant, too distracted. I turned off the water. The silence that rushed back into the bathroom was heavy. Elena, I said softly. She blinked, looking up at me. Her eyes were clear now, the shock beginning to fade, replaced by a weary acceptance. Is it over? She asked. The water? Yes. The rest of it, she said. Marcus, the police, the investigation. I grabbed a towel and wrapped it around my waist. I stepped out of the shower and walked over to her. I knelt on the wet tile, ignoring the cold against my knees. I took her hands in mine, careful of the raw skin. Marcus Sterling died in a tragic drug deal gone wrong. I recited the narrative that was currently being fed to every news outlet in Chicago. He was desperate for campaign funds. He met with some dangerous men. It went south. The warehouse burned down. Tragically, his body was identified by dental records. Elena let out a short, dry laugh. And the girl he kidnapped? She was never there, I said. You were at home grieving your father's health scare. You have been here all night, surrounded by security. She searched my face. And people will believe that? People believe what they want to believe, Elena. They want to believe their senator was a tragic hero or a corrupt villain. They don't want to believe a mob boss executed him to save his wife. That story is too messy. I stood up and offered her my hand. Come on. You need to sleep in a real bed. She took my hand. She was shivering. I dried her off with a tenderness that felt foreign to my hands. My hands were made for breaking things, for pulling triggers. But touching her, it felt like handling nitro. Dangerous, but necessary. I carried her to the bed. I dressed her in one of my t-shirts because I couldn't find her pajamas and I didn't want to call the staff. I wanted the world to stay outside this room for a few more hours. I climbed in beside her. I didn't try to touch her sexually. I just pulled her back against my chest, wrapping my arm around her waist, anchoring her to the mattress. Dante is out of surgery, I whispered into the dark. He lost a lot of blood, but the doctors say he is stable. He is asking for a raise. I felt Elena smile against my arm. Give him double, she murmured. Triple, I agreed. We lay there in the silence. I waited for her to fall asleep. I needed her to sleep so I could go downstairs and deal with the fallout. I had a city to calm down. I had bribes to pay. But she didn't sleep. Luca? Yeah. What happens now? It was the question I had been dreading. Go to sleep, Elena. We can talk about it in the morning. I can't sleep, she said, shifting so she could look at me. I need to know. The threat is gone. Marcus is dead. The company is safe. The deal is done. I looked at her. In the dim light, she looked wrecked. Beautiful, but wrecked. I sat up. I turned on the bedside lamp, casting a warm gold glow over the room. Stay here, I said. I got up and walked to the wall, safe, hidden behind a painting of a storm at sea. I punched in the code. The heavy metal door swung open. I reached inside and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I walked back to the bed and sat on the edge. This, I said, holding up the envelope, is the contract, the transfer of debt, the marriage license, the prenuptial agreement that protects your father's assets in case of a federal seizure. Elena stared at the envelope. Okay, she said slowly. This was the leverage, I said. I bought your debt to force you to marry me. I used Marcus as a threat to keep you here. I looked down at the papers. Marcus is dead. The debt, consider it a wedding gift. Vance shipping is yours again. Free and clear. I tossed the envelope onto the bed between us. You are free, Elena. She looked at the envelope. Then she looked at me. Her expression was unreadable. You are firing me? She asked. I huffed a laugh, running a hand through my damp hair. I am not firing you. I am releasing you. The danger is over. You don't need my protection anymore. You can take the papers, file for an annulment, and go back to your life. You can be the respectable CEO. You can find a nice, boring husband who doesn't come home with blood on his shirt. It physically hurt to say the words. My chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. I wanted to grab her and tell her she wasn't going anywhere. I wanted to lock the doors, but she had to choose. If she stayed because of the debt, she was a prisoner. If she stayed because of the fear, she was a victim. I needed her to be neither. Elena reached out and picked up the envelope. She weighed it in her hand. So, she said, her voice quiet. If I walk out that door right now, you won't stop me? No. You won't bankrupt my father? No. You won't burn down my house? I looked at her. I might burn down the house, I admitted. Out of spite, but I won't hurt you. She nodded. She tapped the envelope against her chin, thinking. You know, she said conversationally. Before I met you, my life was very safe. It was very predictable. I knew exactly what I was going to do every day for the next 40 years. She looked up at me. And I was bored out of my mind, Luca. I was dying of boredom. She sat up on her knees. The oversized t-shirt slipped off one shoulder. She crawled across the mattress toward me. She moved like a cat, graceful, predatory. She stopped when she was kneeling right between my legs. She placed the envelope on my chest. I don't want safe, she whispered. She reached for the lighter on the nightstand, the silver Zippo I used for cigars. She flicked it open. The flame danced, reflecting in her blue eyes. And I certainly don't want an annulment. She held the flame to the corner of the envelope. I watched as the paper caught fire. The yellow flame curled the edges, turning the legal jargon and the signatures into black ash. She held it until the heat was too close to her fingers. Then she dropped the burning packet into the empty metal wastebasket by the bed. We watched it burn. We watched the leverage disappear. When the fire died down, leaving nothing but smoke and ash, she looked back at me. No more deals, she said. No more transactions. She placed her hands on my shoulders. I am not staying because I owe you money, Luca. I am staying because I am just as twisted as you are. I liked seeing him bleed. I liked seeing you kill him. She leaned in, her nose brushing against mine. I think you ruined me. I wrapped my arms around her waist, pulling her flush against me. I buried my face in her neck, inhaling the scent of her skin, smoke, and survival. I didn't ruin you, Elena, I growled. I just woke you up. I pulled back to look at her. You realize what this means, I said seriously. If you stay, there is no exit strategy. You are Mrs. Moretti. You are the target. You are the queen on the chessboard. Every enemy I have becomes your enemy. She smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Let them come, she said. I have a knife in my boot. I laughed. I couldn't help it. The relief washed over me like a tidal wave. You lost that knife, I reminded her. Then buy me a new one, she demanded. A bigger one. Done. I kissed her. It wasn't hungry or desperate like before. It was solid. It was a seal on a new contract, one written not in ink but in blood and choice. Get dressed, I said, pulling back. She frowned. Why? It's midnight. Because, I said, standing up and pulling her with me. We have one more thing to do. 20 minutes later, we were in the library. My soldiers were there. The capos from the different territories. My inner circle. They looked tired, battered, and on edge. They had spent the night securing the city, scrubbing the crime scene, and waiting for the fallout. When I walked in, they all stood up. I was wearing a fresh suit. Elena was beside me. She was wearing a black silk dress she had found in her boxes. It was severe, elegant, and she wore it like armor. The bruise on her temple was visible, but she didn't try to hide it. She wore it like a medal of war. The room went silent. Sit, I commanded. They sat. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table. Elena stood at my right hand. Marcus Sterling is dead, I announced. The police have ruled it an accident. The investigation into Vance shipping is closed. The threat to our family is neutralized. A ripple of relief went through the room. However, I continued, my voice hardening, there will be chaos. The other families will see this as a moment of transition. They will think we are distracted. They will think we are weak. I looked around the table, meeting the eyes of every killer in the room. I want you to send a message to the Russians, to the triads, to everyone. I placed my hand on Elena's shoulder. Tell them that the Moretti family is not weak. Tell them that we have never been stronger. I looked at Elena. This is not just my wife, I said, my voice echoing in the library. She is not a civilian. She is not a bystander. She is part of this organization. If she speaks, it is with my voice. If she gives an order, you follow it as if it came from me. I saw the surprise in their faces. In our world, wives were kept in the dark. They were for photo ops and funerals. But Elena wasn't that kind of wife. Is that understood? I barked. Yes, boss, they chorused. One of the older capos, a man named Sal, looked at Elena. He looked at the bruise. He looked at the way she stood, unwavering. Understood, Mrs. Moretti, Sal said, nodding his head in respect. Elena nodded back. Cool. Regal. Thank you, Sal, she said. Make sure the north side distribution is back on schedule by tomorrow. We lost a day of profit. Sal's eyebrows shot up. Then he grinned. On it. I dismissed them. They filed out, looking at Elena with a new sense of reverence. They knew. They had seen the fire in her eyes. When the room was empty, I turned to her. You are bossy, I said, leaning against the table. I am efficient, she corrected. North side distribution has been lagging for weeks. I read the reports on your desk. I shook my head, smiling. You read my reports? I was bored while you were in the shower. She walked over to me. She placed her hands on my chest, right over my heart. "So," she said, "is that it? Am I crowned?" "Almost," I said. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small velvet box. Not a ring box this time. A longer one. I opened it. Inside was a knife. Custom made. Damascus steel blade, black handle inlaid with mother of pearl. It was beautiful and deadly. "For your boot," I said. She took it. She tested the weight. She smiled. And it was the most terrifyingly beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Perfect," she whispered. She slid it into the waistband of her dress since she wasn't wearing boots. "Now," she said, grabbing my tie and pulling me toward the door. "Take me back to bed, husband. I believe we have a marriage to consummate." "We consummated it last night," I pointed out, following her, willingly. She looked back over her shoulder. "That was business," she teased. Tonight is for pleasure." I followed her out of the library, up the stairs, and into the rest of our lives. The war was over. The rain had begun. And as I watched her walk ahead of me, head high, dangerous and mine, I knew one thing for sure. The devil didn't just get the girl. He got the queen. The end.